Welcome back to the last episode of our Star Wars May marathon that we're doing to celebrate May the 4th. And this week we're covering all about the sequel trilogy, along with our final guest from an Earful podcast, Matt Lunn.
Yeah, with Matt, we're going to talk all things Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker with some controversial opinions in between as well. So you can check out an Earful podcast on socials as well. Don't forget to check them out. They are great guys, and they have a horror and music-based podcast.
Hope you enjoy this episode, and let it roll.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da.
Are you telling me you built a time machine?
The Force may be with you. Always. Assemble.
Welcome back to Get Real, the podcast where we get real about all of our favourite pop culture movies and TV shows. This week, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Chris.
Hello.
And our final co-host from an Earful podcast, Matt Lunn.
Hello.
Hello. That's the most blighty copper you've ever heard in your bloody life.
Bloody hell, mate.
Bloody hell, mate. How you doing, mate? You okay?
I'm not too
Are you
bad.
holding up
I'm
in the
pretty
lockup?
good. I'm not bad. Taking every day as it comes. I've got my beer.
Aye.
All right.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, nice.
I'll swish.
Drink
got
responsibly.
the H2O to keep us hydrated.
H2O. See, I've got both options. So I've currently got option 1, Brewdog. And I've got option 2.
Very nice.
If I decide to go for the H2O and the more healthy routine, then I've got this also.
Yeah.
Very good.
Brewdog is not a sponsor, but Brewdog, if you're listening to this, we will be willing. I have got many empty bottles right next to me.
Other beers are available, just to be specific. But anyway, Matt, so you've joined us for the last 3 films of the Skywalker saga. Your other co-hosts, Matt and other Matt, have come on and done the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. So you've got some relatively big boots to fill on this episode.
I know.
It's literally a trilogy of trilogies. It's a trilogy of Matts, and it's a trilogy of films. So, Matt, are you ready?
I feel like it's like the Olympic beacon. This is like the end ceremony, and I've been given this responsibility to finish this trilogy saga.
It's the Star Wars relay race.
He is
I know.
finishing what the other Matt started, so to speak.
Nice.
Can you do what your grandfather Anakin could not? That's the question.
I mean, maybe, possibly.
Maybe. Nice and optimistic. Well, off we go. We may as well.
But just to remind you, Matt, we will be ranking you all in terms of trilogy after this.
So I've listened. So I listened to the Matty episode the other day, and so I heard the you're critiquing the Matts in order, and I was like, I feel pressure now. I feel the pressure. I feel a bit nervous.
Good.
You know how this episode's going to go then. We talk about the films for a little bit. We give them a Star Wars or Star Wars, and then at the end we'll go for a couple of off-the-cuff questions with you and see how you handle your Star Wars metal at the end of this.
Oh, all right, okay.
So, I mean, to start off, Matt, are you a massive Star Wars fan, would you say?
I'd say that I've definitely been excited every time there's been like a new film out. Like, I think I was introduced to Star Wars back when I remember when Phantom Menace came out, but then I didn't properly get really into it and properly understand it until it was around about like episode 3, and ITV started like playing all the old episodes on there, and they did it like every week.
ITV2 literally still play them every week.
Yeah.
They're still going. It's like, watch them all again. It's like you can just watch on Disney Plus in full without the adverts, but you know. I hear Disney Plus is you're trying to get a sponsor, so I'll help you out with it.
We're still trying. We're trying.
Yeah, it might be a make or break for that once we review these 3 films that they actually made. So it's going to be an interesting one. To get this started on this trilogy of films, I just kind of want to start off by talking about how this has been the 3 Star Wars films that we've been able to go and premiere in the cinemas. When we had 1, 2, and 3, we were probably still a little bit too young to really remember our experiences watching them in the cinema. And obviously we weren't around when the original trilogy was coming out. But
Speak for yourself. I mean,
unless Chris has been reborn.
I'm 59 years old. I remember the day. I remember a Star Wars.
Do you remember there was an episode of How I Met Your Mother years upon years ago, and there's the quote in it where someone's not seen Star Wars, and Jason Segel's character goes, everyone's seen Star Wars, and the only people who haven't seen Star Wars are the people who are actually in the Star Wars.
Pretty accurate statement.
Correct.
Yeah. We've got to think very far back, really, in relation to the other films that have come out recently. Think back to when The Force Awakens came out in cinema.
Back in my day when The Force Awakens came out.
So, Matt, I mean, can you, remember back, that excitement that you had when that trailer first come out and what your thoughts were? Were you like, why are they making another one? Or were you excited? Or
So I remember exactly when it got announced that they were going to do a new Star Wars trilogy. And I remember there was two types of people. There was, number one, absolute dread. And number two... At least you were getting a brand new trilogy that wasn't being owned by George Lucas, but there was still that sort of excitement to it. But then, but at that point, it wasn't completely obvious or full knowledge that Marvel had done the agreement with Disney, hence where all the Avengers films and stuff like that came from. So everyone's argument was then, they've done such a good job with Marvel, then why wouldn't they with Star Wars? So then I think from then everyone started slightly getting on board with it, and that first trailer came out. And everyone lost their crap over it. Just the ambiguous shots. You didn't know much about the plot. And I think that's the best way cinema can probably release a trailer, is just not really giving much away. I probably enjoy films more when you don't know everything about it.
Definitely. Yeah. So we were back in college when it was announced. And I said to Sam, because I remember having a copy of Empire magazine there, and they were talking about Lucasfilm being bought by Disney and stuff. And they were appointing Kathleen Kennedy. And I remember sat in the canteen with Sam. I was like, mate, they need to get J.J. Abrams to direct this. It just needs to be done. The way that he's treated Star Trek, he would do so well with it. A few less lens flares, but he could probably nail this. We all went uni together, the three of us. But I was in a different class from you guys. Yeah. I remember there was a countdown before the trailer dropped, wasn't there? And I was in a lecture. We stopped the lecture, the entire class, and Cormac put the trailer on, the big projector, and we all just sat there and absolutely fanboyed watching this trailer. And that moment where Kylo Ren ignited his lightsaber for the first time, I've never seen a group of people in one such small room freak out so much.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That was such a dope moment when he lit that lightsaber and you get the first beam and then you just get the two side beams as well.
Watching Star Wars generally, for people that were lucky enough to watch it around the original trilogy, they always talk about it like it's such a moment and it's like a thing, you know what I mean? So I think the fact that we managed to go through that with a trilogy speaks, it's lucky. I remember,
we spoke about it last week as well when we talked about the Darth Maul lightsaber. Imagine being in the cinema and seeing that for the first time, not knowing it was coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was our version of that.
That was good.
That's it. So good. Post-trailer, me and Chris went to the same midnight showing for this. Matt, did you go to a midnight showing for this film when it came out, or did you watch it the day it actually came out?
I think I watched it a couple of days after. The only thing I remember specifically about me watching that film was that I had a giant bucket of popcorn, and literally about 20 minutes in, I put my hand into it, and somehow the balance in between my legs went. And this entire bucket of fucking popcorn just made this crashing sound on the floor. It was just dead silence, and I was
slow motion.
I was just casually pretending it didn't happen.
I bet there was Star Wars fans in your showing that were seeing that film for the first time and were absolutely livid.
And they remember that moment as well. That's the moment they'll talk about. Some fucking dickhead dropped his popcorn.
20 minutes in, you could hear a and then that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, we watched it in IMAX. It was like a sold out showing. We like really struggled to get the tickets at first. It was like the Odeon website crashed and all that. And when we went and watched it, we got there well early and there was loads of people dressed up. It was like such an event. Imagine when that opening crawl came on. Like our cinema clapped and applauded when the opening crawl came on. I took my girlfriend and she was just like, what is happening? And I was like, it's that much of a big deal that everyone's going to clap when that opening crawl comes on.
It's like the British certification thing when it comes up with the certificate at the beginning of the film. Like that came up and it said Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and people were like, like there was an audible gasp, and then as soon as it's just like a galaxy far, far away, bam! Everyone was like, yes! Like it was a moment.
I remember when it first comes on with the scroll, but my girlfriend didn't really get the concept of what was about to happen. So when he said came up with obviously in a galaxy far, far away, and then it was that pause when, and 3, 2, 1, and she was like, "What the hell, you did?" So like that, and it came on.
Excellent.
It was so
and
good.
It's crazy to think that was the first time, unless you'd been to like watch another Star Wars film like re-show in the cinema, that you've had that opening in the cinema before.
Yeah.
Like just ridiculous. I remember like everyone was like so excited and just how quiet everyone was in our cinema, and then when it came on it just erupted. It was so wicked. Let's start talking about the film now. We've talked enough about like getting ourselves hyped up and stuff for it. So initial thoughts, because we're going to talk about true thoughts of the film right at the end.
Right.
I'm just going to go between us. So I'll start. I'm going to say that this is obviously visually the best Star Wars films in this trilogy that we've ever had. The look these films have versus the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, they kind of meet in the middle a little bit, where the original trilogy's got all that practical effects and then the prequels were a lot of CG and massive worlds and massive set pieces, where it gives it a good balance in terms of like it's not too far either way. Plus CG now is a lot more forgivable. I'm not going to talk about characters yet, we'll talk about them as they come on, but we'll go to Matt. What was your first impression of this film when you watched it?
I think it was the best you could have got in the scenario that we was in, with the amount of pressure that I had against it, knowing that the legacy of them films that have been made and the mass impact those films have made and cultural references and everything. I think the weight of it, I don't think you would have had a better response any other way. I think cinematography-wise, it was definitely there. I think some of the visuals, which we'll probably discuss in a tiny bit, were mind-blowing and probably everything that you'd want as a Star Wars fan in terms of the films and just visually what you'd want to see. But overall, I thought it was a good start. In the cinema, I remember being going, this, I'm looking forward to what they're going to do next with it. Whether they did good was another thing, but...
Yeah, I agree with you. It's such a massive responsibility to bring these films back. And I think we definitely saw that with, mixed feelings on all three of these films, to be fair. Chris, what was your first impression?
Yeah, so I want to follow on with what you said about like the visual style of it. Obviously, you were talking more like the feel of like practical versus a lot of CG and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also, this film changed the way Star Wars looked. Like, as in, there's camera angles in this that you never get in the Star Wars films and stuff. Like 1 to 6 all kind of have the same sort of visual stylings. This has like dynamic cameras. You got intense close-ups and everything. Like, this film felt a lot more modern. Even though like the prequels came out early 2000s and people were doing these sort of things with films back then anyway. Lord of the Rings and stuff like that is shot totally different to Star Wars. But this one like felt like a proper like modern blockbuster, but also small little camera tricks that you don't normally see in sci-fi films and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Personally, I think The Last Jedi did the best job of this, how it looked and how it felt.
Yeah.
So yeah, this trilogy, the way it started with this first scene, it just sort of set the tone. You've got the dark, menacing introduction that your like original viewers had with Darth Vader originally. You've got Kylo Ren descending on a village in this one. That just sets him up as such a dark, villainous character. You're like, okay, this trilogy is going for something here.
let's start getting into the film then. We start off and it's basically, like you said, the introduction of the stormtroopers. You've got Poe Dameron. It's quite cool the way it kind of gets straight into it. One thing I noticed in this is how much humor is actually put into the beginning of this one with Poe. It's not really something that we tend to get in Star Wars movies. What did we think about that? Obviously, we've watched, me and Chris anyway, have watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9. It's very, very, very different with humor and stuff. It caught me off guard in the cinema, to be fair, and I think that's what made that whole, when Poe's in front of Kylo and he's like, so why do I start talking or do you start talking? It caught me off guard a bit. So what did we think of that?
I think this is Poe's best film out of the three. Reason being, I think in terms of development and for the humor side of that character, I think it just suited the cockiness of that character. I think if you tried to chuck that into like Finn's dialogue or Rey's dialogue, I don't think it would work. But I think because he had that arrogance to him, I think that just worked quite well. And yeah, in comparison to the previous ones, I think they kind of threw a bit more humor into it more than what typically was in the 1, 2, and 3 episodes. There was like slight hints of it, but like it was the odd sarcastic comment from Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that. It wasn't something exactly just like where it was just humorous dialogue added. So yeah, I think it kind of made that interesting in comparison to the previous episodes.
This is something that I've got in my notes here. Like, the jokes in this almost don't feel Star Warsy. Like, this is when I kind of noticed that Disney sort of touch to it.
Yeah.
The ones, like you said, with Poe Dameron work a bit more because he is like that cocky Han Solo type. That's clearly what they were going for. The jokes for me didn't work when, like you said, it was stuff like Finn. Like when later down the line when they got Captain Phasma held hostage and stuff like that, he's like, yeah, I'm in charge. I was like, that feels like such like a Disney TV show joke type thing.
Yeah.
It's
and
very
like,
much...
Han Solo's like, wind your neck in type thing.
It's very much a thing that you'd expect from Marvel as well, because you got that cockiness of like, say, Tony Stark or something like that. I think they took that as a blueprint of what they did with that and said, that works with audiences. Let's try and fit this aspect into these films because it works well with a target audience.
They managed to get it better in the second 2 films in the trilogy.
Yeah.
Because the jokes seem to land better. They feel a lot more natural. Some of the jokes feel a bit forced in The Force Awakens. The forced joke awakens. I quite liked Poe and BB-8. Their relationship at the beginning seemed pretty good. Everyone always says this one is such like a rip-off of like A New Hope. And it is, but my argument has always been that people had such an issue with the prequels that like this film had to toe a very careful line between being nostalgic and also bringing together the fans of the prequels and the original trilogy. I think this film and Rise of Skywalker had the 2 hardest jobs in Star Wars since A New Hope. Like, you have to start a brand new trilogy and bring in 2 groups of fans that seem to pretty much hate each other, and you also need to make it something new.
You've got the thing as well where you've got to accept the fact that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because there was so much of a backlash against episode 1 and 2, mainly. I can see that, but if you had that running background pressure fear of this didn't work, it is known for having a problem with all of this storylines that don't work or didn't fit or didn't click with the target audience that he was trying to go for these people who was so held on to these original 3 films that had such a big impact. Why wouldn't you just go for that frame? Because it's gonna work. Even if they go, oh, it's a bit of a copy and paste, at least it still hits home with it. At least they have them nostalgic references that still work, that still fit in place and make them relate with these new films.
This film had to do this for then the next 2 films to succeed. Like I said, they had to toe the line and bring all the fans together. It had to hit some of those nostalgic beats. Some of them work better than others. We probably could have done without a bigger Death Star. We could have probably done with a different MacGuffin at the end of the film. So it was such a difficult task, and I think for what they managed to achieve with this, like, I think it's a good trilogy. I know a lot of people are going to hate on it so much, but like, it is a good film. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I think that the safest way for them to introduce new characters was to follow the New Hope framework because they know it worked. It was the safest way of doing it, and you want to bring these new characters in as well as, fit the old ones in and do fan service for them. And I think that it was good enough, I think, for this film that we had a lot of interesting things happen that we haven't seen before. So to touch on the scene that we were talking about, you had Kylo Ren freeze that blaster shot in the air, which in the cinema was just like, whoa, shit, that's really cool.
I originally went down the aspect of noting the time that the shot is, because I'd recently I'd recently listened to a Scrubs podcast where they'd done the exact same thing, where they'd noted the exact time frame of where this shot is. So I started with that aspect and then realised I am going to be here forever if I do this. So
You'll be pausing the film.
So
all
there's
the
like
time.
3 notes I made at the beginning which have a time frame. So there's one at 2 minute and 20 seconds of the stormtroopers with the flickering light.
Yeah,
I think that is the one defining shot in these new trilogies that makes stormtroopers look scary as shit. I think it's a good shot. It's like the whole nostalgic thing with like Daleks with Doctor Who, where they actually made them look terrifying for once rather than just being a very large salt and pepper shaker. I think there was just that aspect where it was like, oh, they actually do look quite menacing. It's not just people in white suits. I think
they were a force to be reckoned with in this first scene.
How many like famous A-list actors, celebrities, and stuff like that they got into this film in the first place? So there's at 3 minutes 30, there is the guy. This is like my 3. I'm gonna point out. So then there's a shot at 3 minutes 30 where it is, if I'm saying this right, Max von Sydow, who was the priest.
Max von Sydow, yeah.
There we go. He was the priest from The Exorcist. It was like, oh, they're bringing out the A-gun. They're bringing the thing with Simon Pegg later on where you don't know it's Simon Pegg because it's all covered in practical effects and shit like that, and it's just mental.
Yeah.
Max von Sydow was actually the Holy Knight in the Seventh Seal as well.
He was there.
Drop some film knowledge on us so that we...
Sprinkle it.
Just a little bit of credit so
Like
that
Salt
people
Bae,
know we
just
do a film
sprinkle it.
podcast.
You had Daniel Craig as a stormtrooper. You had a deleted scene with Tom Hardy as a stormtrooper. You had Prince William and Prince Harry. Well, no longer Prince Harry, but as stormtroopers as well.
Jessica Henwick, who played Colleen Wen in Iron Fist. She played a Resistance pilot. She was the one that was in the trench run and stuff like that. And then we've got Hannah John Kamen as well, who played Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp. She is the one that blows up the planet from Starkiller. She's the one that presses the button.
No way.
There's loads of cameos. Like, I said this more about The Last Jedi. Like, The Last Jedi has all of a sudden got Oscar-winning actors and actresses in all of a sudden. I was like, because that film has something to say. Like, that script managed to get Oscar winners in it for a reason. Anyway, back to The Force Awakens.
Yeah, absolutely.
On to the new scene. You were talking about Simon Pegg. Let's just jump into like the introduction of Rey.
Let's talk soundtrack as well. You've got the Kylo theme. You've got the Rey theme coming in. Music is awesome in this film.
Rey's theme is standout. Whenever you hear it, you know what you're hearing, and it just gives you this sense of wonder. It's like her din diddlin, din diddlin, din. Like, it's so different for Star Wars that it just sticks in your memory.
Yeah.
Also, when we see like the Star Destroyers and stuff, like all like crashed and stuff from the Battle of Jakku and that's all like really cool visual stuff that we've not seen before.
I love that. I absolutely love what they did with that in these new films, where they pretty much just treated it as background nostalgia. Just watch her walking through there's the background scene of that she's living in, let's call it, debris from the last war, that she's just casually just living in it. It's just, I think that aspect was just so good. It was just a nice little touch. It didn't need to be there, but it was there, and it just fitted so nicely in what they were doing with it.
Matt, what do you call it? Do you call it an 80-80 or an at-at?
Knowing me, I'll probably call it an at, but
Well,
I know that's wrong. I know
That's because he knows it's the incorrect way of saying it. So,
but I do it just to piss everyone off.
Is an ad.
Actually, you're looking at a new model of an ad.
You mentioned Simon Pegg's character before. This was one of the characters that I really didn't like in the Force Awakens.
It very much reminds me. The name of him's completely gone out of my head. The one that's looking after has Anakin in Episode 1.
Watto.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Your Republic credits are no good here.
Yeah, that's the one. The weird-looking
It's the whole-
Gonzo.
This joke of like quarter portion and blah 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 blah.
1/4 portion.
And then there's the bit that really, and I'm glad that we don't get any more of him, but where he runs out after the Falcon and he's like, "That's mine." It's just like, we don't.
Well, we
need
were meant to get
now.
more of him. Like, there's
Oh, I'm
deleted
glad.
scenes of him going to
Thank
Maz's castle and stuff.
God.
I'm glad that we didn't. You know what? I'm glad Simon Pegg made it in, and I like Simon Pegg, but he just got a rubbish character with Unkar pluck.
It was just more chin than man, wasn't he? I think he was a good foil for her at the beginning. Like, at least it's a character that you're going to recognize instead of just like every time, like she was just getting like talk shit by loads of different fucking traders or something. At least like we had a face that we could recognize.
Yeah.
This guy's going to be a fucking dick.
Well, I think it was just to set a ground level on where Rey was as a character.
Yeah.
So that you could see that she thought that she was nothing at the beginning of this, just to show the development from her at the start of this film to the end of the third installment. I think they just did that for that reason, and then that was it.
I was going to mention this at the end, but I think now's a good time to mention it. So me and Sam brushed on it last time, but we went to Star Wars Celebration and we saw this with a crowd, and like Matt, we were talking to Matty Ashton about how like people from around the world watch films differently, and like they will cheer and like they will do everything. It was, I think, the best way to watch that film. Every time a key character came on screen, they were cheering every single time and stuff like that. There's a girl dressed as Rey, and there's a guy dressed as Kylo Ren, and I don't think they had ever met each other because they were sat on opposite ends of the fucking screening. But like as soon as like they start having a lightsaber fight at the end or something like that, like when somebody was igniting a lightsaber, everybody was holding the lightsabers up in the air and lighting them and stuff like that. That was cool to begin with. Then they start having an actual lightsaber fight while Rey and Kylo are having a lightsaber fight and stuff like
Amazing.
that. So cool. When the Falcon came on screen, people lost their shit. We were saying like people were excited in the midnight screening. People were cheering for the Falcon at Star Wars Celebration.
It was a really weird time where like this film had been out and people probably watched it quite a lot, and then having all these crazy reactions from like every time the character comes on for the first time. So
Would you imagine have been there when after Rogue One had been released and they had that Vader scene at the end? Could you imagine seeing a dedicated fan crowd seeing that shit? Oh my god, it'd be so good.
It'd have its own like chant at like a football match. It'd be like, "Hey!"
Let's go, Vader, let's go.
So let's talk a little bit about that Falcon versus TIE fighter fight that we get at the beginning of the film. It's pretty sick. Pretty sick.
It is one of my favorite bits of this film.
The issue with the prequels is, we said the CGI looks so great. So like in Revenge of the Sith, the first scene that we get is a big space battle, isn't it? And it looks great, but it kind of didn't feel realistic. Like everything looked too shiny and everything like this. Whereas this trilogy, whenever it's doing stuff with like space combat or anything like that, it still feels grounded. Like everything feels tactile. Things feel more real. The Falcon has weight. That's something that the Jedi starfighters never had in the prequels. Like, you could feel the physics almost as they were swinging each other around in the sky and stuff like that. It was so cool.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you prefer the whole like heavy, as though your lightsaber weighs like 10 kilograms kind of fighting versus the whole
Yeah, it was like,
pirouetting of Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith.
yeah, like, because they are space knights essentially, aren't they? Like, it's meant to be a broadsword. Like, it's...
Yeah.
It was weighty and everyone was untrained. It was just like, it felt so good.
Are you saying that there is a better lightsaber fight in this trilogy than the Anakin versus Obi-Wan lightsaber fight?
See, that one has heart to it, so that one's still up there.
See, there's something which is definitely different about both of, the new trilogy and the prequels is, at that point, the Jedi Order is very adamant that they have these years upon years of training, of class, of skill, that they're meant to be the peak of all when it comes to the lightsabers, the fighting, knowledge, and everything. They're meant to be at that. When you have Rey and you have Kylo Ren, Ren has some sort of knowledge on it, but Rey has absolutely not. So obviously they're going to see this big, giant, fucking shiny thing and go, I'm just going to absolutely wail on that bastard. I'm not going to have any class about it. I'm just going to keep hitting until something sticks.
Yeah, that's it. You know, Rey's just picked up a lightsaber and that's it. She's never used it before.
Oh, she didn't even pick it up. She fucking summoned that shit.
Yeah. Well, let's move this on then and let's get to it. So.
Yeah, let's get to it.
So you've got little more humor bits. The whole Kylo rage scene where that officer comes to him and tells him that they escaped Jakku. What girl?
Yun, 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 yun. Just cutting the shit to pieces.
I really enjoyed how Kylo was trying to be his best Darth Vader, but at the same time was just like so emotionally out of control all the time. And you get a lot of that right up until after The Last Jedi when he gets pushed over the edge. He's just a loose cannon throughout all of that.
I love having him so flawed.
I think they do a good job. I think Kylo is one of my favourite characters throughout the whole trilogy because of how flawed they let him be. Reacts in a way someone who is frustrated, and they take the time to, in The Last Jedi especially, to explain why he is that way. People watched The Force Awakens. I think people were expecting him to be a Vader, and he's just not. And I think a lot of people were annoyed at that. And their argument is that, well, he's just a moany emo kid, but he's young, isn't he? And that's how he'd be.
Yeah, he's Anakin, not Vader, is what it is.
Yeah. Both Rey and Kylo are almost like shadows of Anakin, but as in a way that Anakin would have been treated differently. It's like if Anakin had grown up under those circumstances that either of those two have done, he would probably be exactly how they would be.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that he had a Jedi Order and a Clone Wars and a Master and stuff, where these had just been under two separate. From a story writing point of view, it's very interesting how they look at that, and the kind of the poetry of that in the writing is really cool.
The main thing I take from Kylo Ren as a character, and this is more predominantly in The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, is that he very much has a persona that he reacts a certain way he does because he has this constant feeling that he just never gets to the point he wants to get to, that he's constantly losing grip of what he's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So this is proof of when, which we'll get to it with the final bit of The Last Jedi, and that he fails to get to where he wants to be after killing Han. It's this constant feeling that he's never achieving what he wants. He's never like Vader. He's never to the standard of Snoke. He's never achieved what he wanted to get. There's never a plan that's gone well, essentially. So he ends up being this person who's just so frustrated that everything he does, he just never achieves it. That's what creates him.
Yeah, everyone that he looks up to as master in some way has failed him or has compared him to Vader.
Yeah.
Like the amount of times Snoke and then Palpatine like tells him that he will never be Vader. You should be Vader, but you're not. You're a failure. And like it's just drilled into him. They've broken him down as a person.
So as we move on in The Force Awakens, we have a bit more better humour, I'd say, between BB-8, Finn and Rey. The whole little thumbs up lighter scene that just became an absolute meme.
It was the best gif.
Yes, we can all quite literally agree that is a very, very funny scene. I also like all the lifting BB-8 down when they're trying to hide underneath the Falcon, and he's like dead heavy. Like that's the humor that's really good. Like literally, if you tried to pass a droid down, that's what would happen. And it's
the
fun.
visual stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's Star Wars, and you almost attach that like real aspect to it. And I think that's the humor that makes that works in this film. And then you got the Han and Chewie reveal. Take a second. We saw this in the trailer. What did we think of Han in this film?
As a character, I love Han Solo. I love Chewbacca. Chewbacca is like my favorite, but I'll get to that in a minute. So that's pretty good. I enjoyed that. That was nice. I think the way it's depicted and the way it rolls is two ways, and this is completely ignoring Rise of Skywalker because it kind of has some sort of redemption to it, but I think that was just the circumstance it landed in. It was very much the express way of Harrison Ford never having to play Han Solo ever again. He took it, he leapt on it. And I think he's just doing it one by one.
I'll do it if you
franchise.
kill me.
So next will be Indiana Jones. He'll find a way to get from to kill off Indy, and then that'll be it. He won't be asked again. He won't be pestered.
It'll be the first scene. He'll get smushed by the boulder.
Yeah, and then Shia LaBeouf will take over, and it's all over. But I
That'll be
think
Chris Pratt. They'll recast as Chris Pratt.
yeah, he just gets up. It's like regeneration. He just comes back up, and it's Chris Pratt. Be magic, be magic. But I think they did as much as they could, and I think they needed that gravity in the final bit. So I think in terms of the way it landed, I think it works.
And it brought the sincerity that we saw in Han at the end of Return of the Jedi. Like we spoke last week, that like he was growing as a person and everything, and like he had that optimism to him. That first "We're home" felt like more than just those two were home. It was like Star Wars as a franchise is home. Is it the Rathdar?
The Raftars, yeah.
Yeah, Raftars. Like a lot of people don't like this scene, but like it is funny, but it gave sort of like the buffer of the introduction and bonding of the characters together, didn't it?
Yeah.
And also
so,
you've got Kanja Club, which is like between our group of friends is one of the best fucking references to come out of this.
It's such a meme.
Tell that
isn't
to
it?
Kanja Club.
Yeah.
But also,
I
like, they cast the guys from the raid and then they just get killed off instantly. You don't cast the guys from the raid and not have them do fucking martial arts. Like, they didn't get a single punch or a kick off. They just died.
Yeah, I agree with Han. I agree that this is a much more grounded Han Solo, where he's had a kid and he's grown up and stuff, and he's still trying to smuggle and be a smuggler and a scoundrel and stuff. To make this scene better, you get rid of the Raftars. You don't need them. You should have just had a fight between the Death Gang, which were the rule of cool because they looked cool. These
with those red fucking circle faces.
And I don't know what it is with red characters in Star Wars that have helmets and costumes that look cool and don't get any coolness happen with them until The Last Jedi. But it should have literally have just been a battle between those two gangs and Han, and that's it.
Imagine, like, the main guy from the raid, he's there, he's not wearing a helmet or anything. Like, we know who this guy is. Like, if you've seen like the raid or any sort of martial arts film like in the last 5-10 years, like you know who this guy is and you know that he's going to kick some ass. Like just imagine a scene of him absolutely like wailing on Chewie doing like some sort of like martial arts type thing, but Chewie's fucking stacked so he just rips his arms off or something. Like imagine something like that.
It's so
just
good.
Like, and then you've got Rey and Finn underneath like opening and shutting doors on people. Like,
yeah, that's it. That would have been
separating off different groups to fight and stuff.
It would have been so much cooler, in my opinion.
Yeah,
just would have been. It would have fixed it. So this is the point where you get Snoke now. I don't think we had Snoke revealed in the trailer. I don't think. I think it was just his voice.
Yeah.
So this was like the first visual we got of Snoke. So let's just take a moment. We all thought he was Darth Plagueis.
Matt, what was your Snoke theory? Because everybody had a Snoke theory.
I thought it was what we've just said. I honestly, hand on heart, thought that we were going to be going down the route of that it was Sidious's old master and that he was trying to return like an absolute boss and he was going to fuck shit up. So he goes from being this fearsome thing, he has so many theories and stuff like that, and then by the second film, he's essentially just a bit more of a powerful version of Jeff Goldblum's character from Thor Ragnarok.
The Grandmaster.
Yeah. That is literally, I had this sudden like realization which went like that, and it was like, oh my god, it is.
Same outfit.
That's a really funny parallel that I've not drew.
And I literally thought of it before and I was like, oh my god.
Sam, you know how you made that post of Lando and Uncut Gems?
Oh yeah,
we need to get a side by side of Snoke and the Grandmaster.
Yep,
same
Can you
energy.
imagine if Snoke was like voiced by Jeff Goldblum? How much weird would it be?
Right, make that supercut. Make that supercut.
I think the build-up was the most gutting thing about Snoke. I think having so many theories and thoughts and your mind just like blowing with this idea of that it could be this, it could be that, and then it's just not. And I think that was the big theme with Last Jedi. But I diverge, I digress. We'll talk about that in a tiny bit. But that was my thoughts on that.
But moving on, we go to Maz's castle. We get lots of looks at lots of aliens in this.
This is their cantina for the franchise, wasn't it? Like,
this is it. This is like, get ILM, get all those practical aliens out. You then get the next big thing, which is the lightsaber flashback when Rey goes to the basement and stuff.
Oh, I loved this scene. Like, it was so cool. Like, and it set the groundwork of where the story was going in the future as well. Like, this set up a lot of the themes of The Last Jedi and stuff. And I think this was what most people had most questions about after this film, was like, what happened to the Jedi Temple? What happened to Luke in this moment and everything like this? And you get the awesome reveal of the Knights of Ren, which we had seen in the trailer. And like, me and Sam were like, fucking these Knights of Ren are going to be fucking shit hot. And then in 2 fucking films time we get one scene with them in, and it was shocking. Like, the Knights of Ren are so wasted. Like that sucks, but this whole force vision from the lightsaber thing on the whole was like really cool. Like, it captured you. I remember being in the cinema sat next to Sam, and like, we were just there like, this is cool, because this was the first time like we proper saw what it was like to be inside one of these visions. Like, before this we had only had Luke's battle in the cave, and then we had Anakin's like dreams, didn't we? But we didn't really see much. We just saw flashes of like blurry images of Padme dying.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Matt, before we move on?
I think it was just one heck of a nostalgia trip. Like, you had the Ewan McGregor mini cameo. I think just the weight of that bit. I think it knew what its weight was. I think it was very much like for the audience, it was very much just like a gravity weight of knowing where this franchise is. Like, it knew where it sat, and it was like, this is what the past is, and this is where we are now. This is your present of your future of Star Wars, of the next franchise. And I think that was like a pivotal scene of showing what that was.
And I think this is what started the rumor mill in terms of, you know, Rey, is she a Kenobi, is she a Skywalker? And that's what started all that as well when those films first started coming out. So we then move to the reveal of Starkiller Base. We get another Death Star.
Could you be more Nazi?
Yeah, this speech is one of the highlight moments of this film. It is so evil and it is so powerful, and you've really got to like take a minute to think about the gravitas of this situation. So when I watched The Force Awakens back, and you realize like what a big moment this is, essentially they destroy the Republic in one go. When you think about that with the speech, and you think about all the First Order there for that event, that's what makes that so powerful at the same time, as well as how Nazi Germany that moment is. It's just, I think it's definitely one of Domhnall Gleeson's standout moments in terms of his acting.
100%.
Yeah. And a little fact for you, Matt, that you might not know, that I was talking with Chris about, because he's just played it on Fallen Order. Starkiller Base strongly suggested that it is the same planet the Jedi younglings used to go get their lightsaber crystals from, called Ilum, because in the Fallen Order game you see Ilum, and it's got the trenches, and it's got the big gap where it's been dug into that Starkiller Base has around it.
Way.
So yeah, so there's
And
a little...
after we spoke about that as well, I saw the episode of Clone Wars where they're at the Jedi Temple at Ilum, and it's the same temple that you see in the game and stuff like that. I love just the world building all being tied together. The fact that they've been able to take the heartland of the Jedi Order and they are using that to destroy the fucking galaxy. Just when you think about the implications of that, like how sinister is that? At that point you get the full like attack on Maz's castle and stuff, don't you? And the kidnapping of Rey, and then you get the reintroduction of Leia.
Traitor!
Interesting moment. That Stormtrooper's designation is TR8R.
Yep.
right?
for
Like
traitor.
trait.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
nice.
I think they decided that after the film came out, though, didn't they?
Yeah,
When
they-
everyone was saying
They
it.
did, and they gave them a backstory because that is a stormtrooper that Finn trained with. So that's why he recognizes him and calls him traitor. So adds a little bit
Yeah.
more world building in it as well, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Seeing Carrie in this, and like every time there's a scene with her, like she's just got a gravitas in this trilogy.
Yeah.
And like obviously now in retrospect, now that she's passed on, like it makes it even more heartwarming. But oh man,
Can we like take a moment as well? Like we didn't mention at the beginning how quickly they drop in that it's Ben Solo. We didn't know that until watching this film, and they drop it in so fast. Because I was in the cinema and I was just like, whoa, really? Like that's fast. You know what I mean? So
I think they could have made it more ambiguous, you know. I think they could have played on the factor that Ben, it could have come across that Ben had died. And that it was really just ambiguous until the point at where she was like, bring him back. And then we're like, what? And then I think they could have gone down that route instead.
yeah, maybe have the reveal in their conversation then, rather than Snoke just saying it to Kylo.
Yeah, I think that's a bit...
Because if they had waited until it was Han and Leia talking about it, and he's just there like, I've seen our son, and you're like, who's your son? Then you realise that it was Kylo.
Yeah,
That would have been more impactful than Snoke dropping it.
yeah, it's a little bit less spoon-fed with the reveals, isn't it? So, and let's take a quick minute to talk about that X-Wing scene over the water. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Apocalypse Now.
Oh,
It's so sick.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the Kylo unmasked moment. Now, Matt, you're a massive Adam Driver fan. Was this the baby-faced, emo-looking Adam Driver you were expecting to see when Kylo Ren unmasked? Or...
He did definitely drive the Gerard Way moment on that one. I think as he grows...
He drove it, did he?
He
Drive.
He
Adam
drove
Drivered it.
Drove it. I think... I think the look of Kylo works without the mask, but that is just my preference. But I think in 8 and 9, I think it's a better look. I think in kind of episode 7, it just looks a bit bizarre because they didn't know where it worked with the character, and you had this giant sort of Vader mask that wasn't a Vader mask that made the clicking sound when it was taken off like Vader's and stuff like that. It was just kind of like a weird aspect, and I think it was just like, oh, he looks really youthful. And then you actually see his age, and it's like, holy shit, you are not youthful in the slightest.
Yeah, he is definitely playing a lot younger, isn't he? That's something that he does really well. And you've got to give him credit. He's an amazing actor as well. He's very, very good.
I think he's an absolute highlight of, understandably, of this franchise just because of the acting power he's got. I think he was so well cast. Because from my perspective, when I got introduced to him as an actor, I hadn't seen him in anything. Because I hadn't seen the film that him and the actor who plays Poe did.
Inside Llewyn Davis.
That's the one. They did a film a while back.
Fantastic film.
But I hadn't been introduced to that just yet. When it was the introduction to him as an actor in episode 7, I was like, oh, okay, I wonder where they're going to go with that then. And obviously there's all this other stuff he's done, and he's amazing to it. And he brought so much to these next few films that just worked amazingly.
He wasn't like really experienced when he got cast. Like he was still relatively unknown to a lot of people. Like you said, like inside Llewyn Davis, he only had a small part in, and he was playing an ex-military guy, which he is in real life. So
yeah, it's
like,
crazy.
But he had some sort of credentials. He had been in a Coen Brothers movie. He had been in several features, whereas Daisy Ridley hadn't had as much experience. I think having Adam Driver there to play opposite Daisy Ridley, I think, was a really smart choice because he could bring the gravitas to it, which then brought her level up. I think having those two play off each other, you could tell that they worked well together.
Yeah, have you seen the TED talk that Adam Driver did about his military?
Yeah.
That's pretty
it's
cool.
crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's
He's a
wicked.
really interesting guy, yeah. I can't remember if it's the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, but they do actors on actors. So they, like, when Marriage Story was coming out, they had Scarlett Johansson talking with Chris Evans, and they had Adam Driver on, and I can't remember for the life of me who he's talking to, But that was a really fascinating like insight into him again. Like he is really humble about all this stuff, and he doesn't take anything for granted.
Moving on, we have the Phasma exit, so to speak. She gets with that terrible little bit of humour that we get, which is just writing. An issue with writing, I think, where it's like, who's the boss now, Phasma? Who's the boss? It's
I'm in charge now.
You did it amazingly, John, but it shouldn't have been part of your script. That's the problem with that.
That was the most Disney moment in this film, I think.
Yeah. And then Phasma gets absolutely just rinsed out of the franchise with this. She is there to sell toys. That is what she is there for.
It's a Batman and Robin.
The mask.
The Batman and Robin effect. A film made entirely just for toys.
Yeah, it is exactly that. And then we get the hand death. Now, I'm going to start talking about the hand death because I'm conscious of like how much time we spent. So the one point I really want to make on this is there's a really, really effective bit where when Kylo and Hannah are having that conversation about, you're my son and stuff and your son's
Chef's
dead.
kiss.
The lighting on Kylo's face.
Yes.
There's a really amazing moment where split down his face, one side is blue and one side is red to represent the light side and the dark side. As Starkiller Base absorbs the planet for the sun and it disappears, the blue goes, and it's that moment where Han's got the lightsaber in his hand as well to take it off of him, and the light goes from blue and the red just takes all over his face, and it's a beautiful way of showing that conflict and visualizing it as well.
It shows like just the state of mind.
It's that absolute premier level of cinematography.
It's visual storytelling is what it is. Like you learn everything in that scene, in that moment. Like light in Star Wars is always referred to as hope. And like you said, he's just left with Sith red all over him. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
It's funny because our friend actually had this spoilt for him. He had it tweeted to him before he went into the midnight showing, a screenshot of Han getting skewered.
It wasn't spoilt for him. So he was on his phone when the trailers were on and stuff like that, and he had a notification came through on Instagram. And because like he's got like followers from his music career and stuff like that, people like send him shit whenever he posts anything. So like the lights were going down and the trailers were starting and stuff like that. We like turn your phone off. No. So he turned his phone off and didn't see it. The first thing he looked at when he opened his phone after the film was that notification, and it was a screenshot of Han getting skewered. Like he was so close to having it spoiled for him.
Oh, it's mad, isn't it? So Matt, what did you think of that moment? Because that's quite a big moment in this film. What did you think about it?
I was one of them unfortunate bastards who got it ruined for him before the film.
What a shame. What a shame.
I was like, Harrison's killing all his favourite characters. But no, I think it was very much fitting. It was very much Adam drove the story home.
Adam driving a lightsaber through his dad.
Yeah, I think that scene was just so good. I think that's one of my highlights from these three films. I think just this moment was just so heavy, and the way he did it, and it went from feelings to, cheers, you've done me a favor, bye bye. And that was it. It was just like, oh, you nasty. You mean.
You even have Han's body fall into the blue light of the pit as well, though. After this scene, you have Trench Run 3 Revenge of the Trench, as I've put it here.
Yeah, I have nothing to say about this trench run because it is what it is. It's a trench run. And it was cool to get another one.
Great.
I spoke a bit about how it'd be cool to see some of the stuff from the original trilogy with modern CGI. And I think
there you go.
That's about as close as what I get to the original trench run with up-to-date graphics. So
yeah, it looked great, but we didn't need it. Figure out a different way of blowing it up.
Then let's wrap it up. You've got the Kylo, Finn, and Rey fight. Kylo has a very good traitor shout that he gives to Finn.
And he's so brutal in that moment. He's punching his wound to get the last of the blood out, just to sort of like make it clot a bit so that he can fight.
Yeah. And why on earth don't we get the shot from the trailer here? That's what I want to
You'd
know.
get-
Like, I think that whole backward shot, you don't get it. You hear the lightsaber ignite and then the camera moves. You don't get the walk and the backwards light up of the film. He's looking at me very confused now, but Chris, I promise you, it's not in there.
I'm having one of those like Mandela effects where you're sure something happened.
I think,
I'll tell you.
Like, I think my brain's inserted that shot into the film.
I think you fit the piece in there as a piece of the puzzle because you see that shot in the trailer and it's not in the film, but in your brain you've had lodged that piece of memory so hard. So then when you actually watch it, it's like, yeah, that was there. That shot was there.
I know, but you know what? A little bit of his theme or something, it would have been cool, man. It would have been cool. Like I said, if there was bits that I could change and go back, and if I had the control to change something, I would have put that in, put a little bit of his theme, and have a bit more music in this bit, personally.
Yeah, like this is where you first see the conflict inside of Rey. What side of the Force is she going to go to? Like in the novelization, you know, when she's on the edge and like he's like literally forcing her over and he's like, join me, like I'll teach you how to use the Force type thing. She's hearing Snoke and Palpatine in her head in the novelization of it that came out the same day as the film. She's hearing Snoke inside of her head being like, I'm going to train you in the Force, like fall to the dark side and I'll show you how to use the Force. You'll be so powerful, fulfill your destiny, all this sort of shit. So like you see in that moment, like he's got her like on her last legs, and like this is when like the character that she would go on to be in that moment, you see her close her eyes and she tunes everything out, and that's when she opens herself up to the Force fully.
I mean,
such a cool scene.
She does the cool lightsaber grab, which was like the moment in the film.
Yeah.
You get the
What's the
soundtrack
stuff?
and stuff.
That was the
the
gasp.
stuff. That was the gasp. Yeah, that was a cool gasp. But I think people were like, "Oh, Luke's gonna grab it, and whose jacket is it?" and all that. There was a lot of questions.
Who dies in this scene? Who's the jacket?
There was because in the trailer, Matt, there was a little like where you see Rey like over somebody who looks
She's
dead.
crying.
It's Finn in the actual film, but a lot of people were thinking, "Who is it?" And there was
Everyone thought it was Han because of the jacket.
I thought that scene killed. I think to wrap up the film the way it did, I think it was the perfect way to wrap that up with that fight scene, with that part, with the moment when the lightsaber comes over. It's like, oh, this is what we wanted. This is Star Wars. This is the pivotal moment. I think that location, man. I think it was the
Snowy
perfect
forest. It's cool.
Yeah, I think the snowy forest worked well. I think it worked its purpose.
So speaking of wrapping up, we have Luke on an island is the last shot of this film.
Incredible, but I don't like the way it was shot.
I don't like the helicopter bit at the end.
This is my thing, right? Okay, so she goes up and she pulls the lightsaber out, but then it's just awkward, like shot of her, shot of him, shot of the lightsaber, shot of him, shot of her, like, and then you've just got the really long panoramic with the fucking helicopter, and you're like, imagine doing that in real life, just staring at somebody blankly for 2 minutes, holding your arm out. Like it's so weird. Like, what they should have done is, like, they had the close-ups of each other's faces, show her, and then show it Luke, and, like, he's looking contemplative, like, you can't tell, like, he's torn between, like, happiness and sadness, and then, like, you see a look of shock on his face, and then just cut to a close-up of her hand holding out the lightsaber, cut to black, fucking credits.
I wanted to see a shot of seeing how fucking fucked up that lightsaber is. Like, the fact that how old that thing is in the first place, number one. And number two, how much shit it's been through.
Nah, this is space metal. It don't rust.
But I want it not to rust, but just to look a bit scratched, a bit fucked. I think just so I see it have that bit of gravitas to it.
That's what I thought in Rise of Skywalker. Like, after it just got blown up in The Last Jedi, like, it is so shiny and chromy. Like,
right?
It's definitely like not been repaired. It's just been completely remade.
Before we give our like final thoughts on The Force Awakens, we're gonna go through and do Star Wars or Star Wars. So I'm gonna start with you, Chris. Star Wars or Star Wars?
It's a Star Wars.
Okay. Matt, what's your take on it?
I'm gonna say Star Wars.
What are you saying, Sam?
I am actually going to give it a Star Wars, The Force Awakens, because there's a lot of controversy around these films in terms of what people think are good and what people think are bad. And I think it's very easy to be influenced by people's thoughts on stuff and follow a crowd. Now, there's a crowd of people who are they think either The Last Jedi is really good, or they think The Rise of Skywalker is really good, or they hate them both and like The Force Awakens. So it's so conflictive, and I think I based it off how many moments were in this film that hit me, and how many moments in this film that I really switched off. And to be honest, watching The Force Awakens again was the one that I was not excited about. It holds a special place because of the feelings that I got when I watched it in the cinema. I have grown to forgive some of the problems that people had with characters, because you've got to think about the pressure that these actors went through. One, being their first ever Star Wars film, and two, they've got such a massive precedence to bring this saga back. So at the same time, I do understand why it is a Star Wars, but to me, this film's a Star Wars. So I just wanted to justify that a little bit before anyone decides to unsubscribe to the podcast because of my opinion on it.
The Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi. Let's fire through this, because the trend that we have with these episodes is we talk a lot about the first of the three, and then we have to rush through the last two.
Panic rush.
So I apologise for any weird edits in this, but I will have to cut some stuff out to make this good for time. So
I think we spoke too much about the fact that this was a brand new Star Wars trilogy at the beginning of this fucking episode.
Apologies if over these last few episodes you've heard any dodgy cuts or edits, but hopefully you haven't, so that's cool. Right, Last Jedi, best intro in my opinion, some of the coolest visuals, some of the coolest sounds. This, for me, is the best first 10 minutes of the prequels and the sequels. This has got the best opening scene. I changed my mind. Give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts.
I agree with that, with the fact that this is the key film that I think cinematography-wise was just on point.
Yes.
My God. The story might have been flawed in some bits, but my God, did they nail some shots on this. Like the one where Rose's sister is on her back, and it's the slow-mo shot of just seeing her in comparison to everything else. Oh, man, they killed it.
Like, this film in particular had that visual aesthetic. Like, Rian Johnson did something that you've not got in any other Star Wars film. That close-up of Rose's sister, just of her eye, and you see the struggle. Like, you see everything in that character's face, and you've never seen a close-up framed like that of just half of her face, her eye, and everything going on in the background. Like you said, the cinematography in this film was phenomenal.
Yeah, and it goes without saying with how much I'm going to kind of talk about moments in this film, but this is one of my favourites Star Wars films, period, just because of how out there and how beautiful some of the shots are in this. And to me, I think that this film you do have to think a lot more about in order to appreciate it. It's full of principles and lessons throughout the film, and there are things that are under the surface with this that you need to think about when you watch it. If you watch this film and don't think about it, you're not going to like it. I know Chris has wrote a dissertation on this, but
I was literally about to say, like, there's one surface level theme in this film that everybody that I saw hate this film completely ignored and did not understand. There is some toxic ass fanboys out there, and they ignored the main principle that this film was trying to instill in the next generation of Star Wars fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll cover it as we get to it. My notes for all these films have been pretty scarce because I didn't want to rabbit on too much, but I've written a dissertation on this thing. And to be honest, if I were to go back to uni now and actually do film, which I probably should have done in the first place, this would have been my dissertation piece, would have been The Last Jedi, because the underlying themes in this film are phenomenal. Rian Johnson had something to say in this, and this is why it got Laura Dern. This is why it got Benicio del Toro. Oscar-winning actors and actresses flocked to this film to be in it.
If you thought Chris spoke a lot already in these last 3 episodes, you're going to hear an absolute masterpiece from him. Here we go.
This film is like mine and Sam's Dave Filoni moment from the new episode of Star Wars Galaxy. If you haven't seen it, Gallery, sorry, not Star Wars Galaxy.
Yeah, I'm going to have a moment when we talk about The Rise of Skywalker anyway. The humour's spot on in this film. I think that the hooks and Poe joke, I think, really works. I think it's good. I think the BB-8 plugging the sparks is really good humour. That freaking X-Wing handbrake turn that we get is heavy AF. That is wicked.
When those bombers are first coming in, you put Flight of the Valkyries over that and tell me it's not the same shot.
Yeah. There's also an interesting thing. I went back and watched the deleted scenes for Last Jedi and actually had an alternative opening scene, which was Finn waking up instead. So that was actually the initial opening scene, and then they changed it so that it went straight to that space battle, which was a good choice, to be fair.
I think that's better. I always recognised his face, but I didn't recognise where from. You know, General Hux' second in command, it was Captain Pavey, who was played by Adrian Edmondson, which is a great British comedy actor from like Bottom and The Young Ones and stuff like that. Great actor.
Takes you where Force Awakens leaves off, which is nice. We get to see that difference straight away. I wasn't as hurt about him chucking the lightsaber as what everybody else was. I thought it was it was like a what moment in the cinema.
That moment in our screening made everybody laugh. We were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, it just caught you off guard. You were like, what the fuck's he doing? Like, I get why people are kind of pissy about it, but in the grand scheme of Luke's arc, it makes total sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, when you see that one scene out of context for the first time, you're like, what the fuck? And I think that's why people laughed, but when you see his character arc altogether, that's why it makes sense.
What was your reaction to that in the cinema when you watched it? Because obviously it was such a massive moment that was hyped up in The Force Awakens, but obviously everyone had I don't think a lot of people saw that coming where he just chucked the lightsaber over his back, Matt. So
I think... Nah.
Do you know what? I was about to say, this is the only trilogy without somebody yeeting themselves off something, but he just yeets the lightsaber instead, so there we go. We got our yeet moment.
There you go.
My overall thoughts on certain scenes like this is we've been given this message of what to expect with this film ever since the first trailer, where there's the shot of Luke going, this isn't going to go the way you expect it to. And I think that was driven, and no one took notice of it because they thought it was going to be out of context. But the whole fact that Rian Johnson had this message, and it was pretty much in fucking flashing neon lights, everyone ignored it. They kept going with the theories and their ideas and stuff like that. And when we got what The Last Jedi was, everyone was like, what? What do you mean? It was like, we didn't want this.
Yeah.
This is Star Wars, but you were given this message of how this was going to be since day one. You chose to ignore it. And it was said in fucking blatant, bold, hyper-shining fucking neon lights of how this film was going to go. And I think it was refreshing. I think the whole aspect of Luke throwing this lightsaber, means nothing. I think that was such a refreshing take.
Literally the next scene with Luke in it, he literally says he's not the legendary Luke Skywalker that everybody's been talking about. Like, he's not the version of Luke that fanboys have been jacking off over for fucking 30 years. Like, this is a flawed, real character. Like, he's not just gonna come in and save the day. Like, this isn't his story anymore. And people needed to realize that, and I think that's why so many people didn't like Luke in this trilogy, was because he's not this all-powerful Jedi that was just going to come in and save the day. Why introduce new characters? Why introduce Rey and Kylo and Poe and Finn if you're just going to have fucking Luke come in and do everything for them?
It was powerful in a way that he has understood the failings of everything, and he goes on to talk about that you're not meant to be like a guy swinging a laser sword around, like he said. It's all about learning and being wise and understanding things, and it's a really, like I said, this is a really interesting way that Star Wars takes on it, and I think the connections and stuff it makes is what makes this film really good. So, I'll defend The Last Jedi, and probably Chris and Matt will till the end of time, to be fair.
My next note was Luke became wiser in isolation, just like Yoda did.
Yeah, exactly. This is
become the Yoda character.
Yeah, exactly. Luke has done what Yoda did. And just to touch him right at the end, when you get Force Ghost Yoda and Force Ghost Luke in The Rise of Skywalker, the Force Ghost Yoda you get is the Yoda from Dagobah, not the Yoda from Clone Wars. And the Force Ghost Luke you get in The Rise of Skywalker is old man Luke, who's wearing his robes when he's had that conversation with Yoda. And the rule with Force Ghosts is they are at their most powerful or at their best when you get them in their Force Ghost form. And that's why they're the way they are, and that's why that is so important. Otherwise, you would have got young Mark Hamill as a Force Ghost, and if that was what Star Wars wanted you to think, that he was most powerful there, then you're wrong. Amen.
Preach.
Right,
Bless.
Let's move this along. So another big moment is when Leia dies in this film. A lot of people were a bit torn on how she Mary Poppins herself back to life and goes back to the ship. What were your thoughts on that?
I felt like I don't know how to put it into words. This bit, the fact that she goes into Superman mode made me chuckle. I remember seeing in the cinemas being like, okay, I see what you're doing. I want some sort of explanation on what you're doing there.
See, this didn't bother me. Like, we always knew she was Force sensitive and stuff like that. Yet it was a bit weird the way that, like, she used Force pull in a different way that we haven't seen people really use it before. We've had, since Return of the Jedi, we've had confirmation that Leia is one with the Force.
Yeah, I don't think people's problems were that she was Force sensitive. I think the problem is in the context of it. She was blown out of a bridge into space. She was frozen over, and it's like she was still alive. I think that was the problem that I had with that bit. I would have rather have...
Nobody cared when fucking Star-Lord did it in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Different universe.
It's the exact same thing, though. He gets sucked out and he starts to freeze up in space because everyone seems to think as soon as you go in space, like, your head explodes. It doesn't.
Yeah, but
you'll succumb to the cold of space
scanners.
Right, we're not bringing Marvel into this, Chris. It's Star Wars.
No, I started to bring science into it. You got to freeze before you explode. So, like, she had time to pull herself back in.
Neither of these films are science. Neither of them. Look, I think the thing is that she died and come back. I don't think realistically any other character in the Star Wars universe that may have happened to. You know what I mean? I think that's what. But they didn't want to kill her off. I think it was that fake out, wasn't it? Where it's like we're not done with her yet.
We actually had like a pretty important moment before this as well. Is the conversation between Poe and Leia when she calls him out on his shit. Yeah, and like at what cost? Like, you took out a dreadnought, but at what cost? And that sets up his entire arc for this film. Also, she says, "Get your head out your cockpit," which is a brilliant Disney way of being like, "Stop thinking with your dick and stop being a dickhead." Like, the fact that she said cockpit instead of "stop being a cock" is like great censorship. Like, this is the first instant that we see where his character arc is going and what one of the main themes of this film. Just to start my dissertation off, is about toxicity and toxic masculinity is what this film deals with so heavily, and it's no coincidence that this film came out probably a year and a half, 2 years into the Me Too movement as well. Like, there's no chance that is a coincidence, and there's no chance that Laura Dern would have been in this film without it having such a strong female presence in this film.
Okay, that's interesting. It's an interesting way of looking at it, yeah.
I've got so many things about this throughout, which I'll tell you as they come up.
We talk about Force powers being crazy in this, but we talk about Force Skype for a second. Obviously, it's then revealed that Snoke, or Palpatine, is bridging them together, but this was quite a controversial thing that people had problems with and people thought were cool in The Last Jedi.
I thought it was fucking hilarious. I thought it was still fat till she just turned and just Lauren and went, and then he was like, type thing. And it's kind of like, they were like, and then all of a sudden she just like throws out a blaster gun and fucking aims at him. He's like, what the fuck? Like, type thing. And then it kept like just
feels
being at the
like
most,
he's been shot.
Yeah. I feel like it's the most inconvenient times of when this happens. Like the one where just further on in the film where he's just casually got these Kylo man muscles out and fucking is just
Wide boy Kylo.
He just turns around
like,
with
just
his very high
on,
pants on, and he's like, "Have you not got something to cover it or something like that?"
Just put your massive wide chest away, please.
So the next thing we have is the lessons that Luke's doing for Rey, which is cool. You get a little bit of a joke about how he wiggles the leaf in front of her hand and stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a touch on Force for people who might not, people who are going in who aren't Star Wars buffs who, it's space wizards and stuff, isn't it? So it's a nice little touch on that. But what I find very interesting, and to me, this already sets her up from now to be set up as a Palpatine. I have a feeling that they knew this from the very beginning with her. They had this all in place. When Rey's connecting to the Force for that first time with Luke, and she says she sees the life and stuff, which also is a very, very cool montage of images and stuff, which we don't ever really get in Star Wars films. When he says she goes straight to the dark and she starts to see all this stuff, and I think to me that is straight away she's looking inside of herself. He's saying look inside of yourself, and he's seeing the light, and then she sees the dark, and he says you went straight to the dark, and that I think is the setup of her being a Palpatine or being from Palpatine from then. So it's all been there. It wasn't a surprise. It was all set up from the get-go anyway.
I'm pretty sure I've heard JJ say that before they started the trilogy, they knew she was a Palpatine. And I think that they told Rian Johnson that, and that's why, like you said, she goes straight to the dark in this. The whole bit later on as well where, like he's saying, like, your parents are nothing. I'm not sure they figured out how she was connected to Palpatine. Maybe they were going to go with another Shmi Skywalker type thing, like her parents were nothing.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk about this now so we don't need to talk about it later, because there's no point going off to come back to it, right? So what I got from this, I could be wrong, whatever, but it's what I took away. So when you get Rey in the cave and she sees herself, she sees the two people go to one, and then she sees the one person, and then she sees herself. So to me, what that says is that it isn't clear who her parents were, and that's why you see two people in black go into one person, and that's why she sees herself. She says, show me who my parents are. The reason it shows her herself is because she doesn't have blood parents. She wasn't born from her parents, she was born from the Force, and that is why she sees herself. And that's why when Kylo has that vision and tells her, that's because it isn't clear to Kylo. All Kylo's had a vision of is these junk trader parents leave her. That's what he's seen. And his dictation of that would be that that's her parents. But later on in The Rise of Skywalker, when Palpatine probably explains it to him, what we don't see is how he explains it. So at this point, if she was using the Force to find out who her parents were, if she had blood parents, in that scene, it would show her. It would show her them. It's not in Star Wars that would show her, and based off what that cave is, it would show her. So that's why I really strongly believe that she is another Anakin, and I think that's why what happens is that her mum and dad aren't Palpatine's children. I just want to make that clear. Palpatine never had a child. That's my theory. So Palpatine never had a child. He Shmi Skywalkered this couple.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. And
when he sent that Sith bounty hunter or whatever to kill them, he was trying to find that child. Now she's become of age to train her like he was going to take Anakin and train him. And he couldn't do it because they saved her. So what's the next best thing? The next best thing would be to take Ben Solo once you've learned of Ben being related to Leia, therefore related to Anakin. So that's your next best thing. So they saw Anakin as the son of a slaver. You see Rey as the daughter of junk traders. So that would also explain how she became powerful so quickly, because you have to look at her as the equivalent of Anakin, but with more powerful guidance. She's focusing on her abilities from training that she's had from Luke and Leia throughout the two films, without the distractions of things like a Jedi Order and a Jedi Council formalities and the Clone Wars. But like I said, maybe Palpatine didn't know about Ben Solo, but once he did, that's why he had no longer a use for Rey. And that's why he wanted Rey to die until he had this idea in The Rise of Skywalker. That's my rant. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. That is my rant on...
That's what...
Yeah.
For me, the reason why she sees herself is for the same reason. One of the themes in Rise of Skywalker is it's not necessarily the family that you're part of, it's the family that you choose to have. And that's something that Palpatine says to her, is like, you're going to watch your new family, your chosen family die. And that's why she's a Skywalker at the end of it, because that's the family that she chose. She chose the light. She chose the Skywalkers to train her to be her guidance in the world, so they became her family. And also, if she is a product of Palpatine the same way that Anakin was, then she is much of a Skywalker as Anakin is.
I still have thoughts on that, but we'll get to that. Matt, what's your thoughts on that big old rant? Because I've covered off 2 bits from 2 different films that we're not going to need to talk about now. So
I've probably not given as much as thought as you two did. I'm going to be honest.
Nope, I promise you wouldn't have, so don't worry about it.
So I didn't have an issue with the whole Palpatine being her grandfather thing. I just kind of accepted it. I thought that's just the way it was. The thing I took from the reflection thing was very much sort of in the same vein as what you looked at, but because she had no attachment really to her parents and was just very independent, and that's why she saw the reflection of herself, I kind of took it as that. So that's where I kind of went with that thought process.
I was somewhere like a merge between the two of you, I think.
Yeah.
When you see the close-ups of her with Luke over her shoulder explaining to her what the Force actually is, they're both wearing entirely grey. The wall slate behind them is entirely grey. Like, most of the shots that we see of the world around them is layered in a grey tone. That's because he's saying that it's not the black and the white, it's not the light and the dark. Like, you need to be down the middle. That's what balancing the Force really is. And I think that was the theme that they were going for in this. It's like, exact opposites in any way are not good. Like, you don't need a left, you don't need a right, you need a centre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And I think, like, the colouring of that entire island, which is that entire island's purpose is to say, let the past die, let the Jedi die, but also don't give in to the Sith. Become the neutral middle, which is the purest form of the Force, is the grey. I think Rian Johnson just told you everything that you needed to tell in that one scene where he's explaining it, and the colours and everything like that just depicts it.
Can we just quickly talk about the cinematography on the scene of, obviously, where it's showing you like a montage of different clips of different stuff, and when you actually see the dark side pit with the waves and it all looks dark and it's just this getting closer and closer. Oh my god, it kills. It's just that cinematography is so good.
Like, that felt like a horror film almost. Like, it was like, I remember Sam shitting himself when the water geyser went off. Like,
I think this is what Rian Johnson like doesn't get recognized for enough for this film. Is visually, you can't fault it. It is amazing. I think this is probably one of those films where we don't need to talk about it scene by scene, but just take parts from it. So, I mean, Canto Bight is probably the next big thing that goes on. In terms of this, I think it's fine. I think it has some interesting topics because it, again, how we talked about how it talks about both sides, this film, a lot. I think how it has that description about how war is funded on either side and stuff is quite an interesting little bit that we don't get a lot in Star Wars. But I do think the Falthia, which are the horse things that escape, is a little bit out of place, I think, and I think it does maybe damage Finn's character a little bit. I understand people's problems with that, but I don't have as much problems with this as what other people do. So what were our thoughts on that Canto Bight bit, which people thought was very prequel?
Like, you hear Rose talking about like it's a despicable place full of greed, like all this sort of stuff. Like, she's describing it how most people would think of like the cantinas and stuff like that, and like it's meant to be like the worst people in the galaxy, and then they show it and then Finn's just swept away with like the beauty of it and everything like that. It's like, yeah, money and greed is seductive, like it is beautiful, it's glossy, like it brings people in. There's a reason it's like a sin, like it brings you in. It has a facade of being great, but it's not. Like, it's built off like slave trade and war profiteering and stuff like that. Like, it's a disgusting place. It's the exact opposite of like how the canteen is shown like in episode 4. A New Hope. Like, it's the most wretched hive of scum and villainy you could ever find, but then it's Canto Bight instead.
I'm in two frames of mind with this bit. So the first bit is what I thought in the cinema was I wasn't a fan of this bit. And the reason being is I thought it drove a bit too far away of like the actual drive of the storyline. I mean, so the other part of what I think about this bit is I get that this film is trying to say something and it's going to have a message, but at the same point of that, it needs to remember what franchise it's in. Where Rian Johnson is incredibly talented, Knives Out is a fantastic film, but there needs to be a certain level of where there's a line of where it sits and what he's trying to point out as a message and how it's meant to drive the storyline along. I think there was too much of like, ironically, there was on one side driving this storyline of what you had, and then there was the other side of it where the message was trying to come across as well. And I imagine at some point there was an amazing version of it where it wasn't hacked a bit by Disney, because they will be having that side of it where they'll be going, this needs to go, this needs to go, this needs to go. I think that was not a big contributing part of where it was just a bit of an uneasy sit for some people because they just didn't understand this concept of that there was a message, but yet it was meant to be the next part in this storyline, and he just didn't know where to go with it. And I think this is where this uneasiness came from with this bit.
Yeah,
but I think there's an argument to be had though that we need these sort of messages in these big tentpole films like this. These are the perfect films to put these things in because people will learn and acknowledge stuff without having to have it forced down the throat. It's like It's like Bombshell clearly tackles like feminism and stuff like that and the problem with the industry and everything the same way that this film does, but Bombshell is about it and people aren't going to see it if they're not willing to open themselves to that. Like, you won't see toxically masculine men seeing that film, but they'll see Star Wars and they might learn something about feminism. There's an argument to be had that we should be having these themes in these films. Like when you're saying like it needs to remember what franchise it's in, I kind of disagree with that. Like it's a great way to put it in there. It is jarring because it's flanked on either side by The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, and Rise of Skywalker tried to do away with a lot of what The Last Jedi did.
Yeah.
And I think that hurt the argument more than anything.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, I totally agree with that these messages need to be had. There needs to be this reflection on, obviously, this is aimed at a younger audience. These messages are important to point out of what's morally right, really. But I feel like because this isn't just a director who's been able to take full control of something, it's a beast upon this film. I think either one way or another, they're not going to have like a straight, narrow directive on what he wanted to achieve from this film. There was always going to be some sort of push from another side to kind of steer it in another direction. I think that's what affected this bit. I think that was the main thing with it. I think it would have totally worked, and it was very prequely. But I think for the storyline, it was just a bit of a strange one to have, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue with Canto Bight is it's jarringly different from the rest of the film. Like, it's got a different message to tell, and it feels a bit tacked on in the middle. I think that's what the biggest issue is, and I think that's why a lot of people didn't like it was because, like you said, it's sidetracked away from the main story.
I'm going to jump in and just say that I have a feeling that maybe the idea of Canto Bight was probably what Disney probably would have wanted more in the film. Like, you would have had a criteria, and it's like, we want you to have this little fun moment in here where
you need a certain amount of planets, a certain amount of different like environments.
You want more world building. You need something that's we want a chase scene in this, you know what I mean? We want something like that in there. It's one of them. So yeah, it's interesting thoughts on Canto Bight. I think that it's definitely one of the more polarizing aspects of this film. Talking about polarizing aspects of the film, we get more of a look at Snoke. Andy Serkis doing the voice is wicked as Snoke in this.
Yeah,
and I think that the sinisterness you've got of his character and the clear display of how powerful he is in terms of how he uses the Force is awesome. And I think it's only explained that it does make sense that it is, again, Palpatine pulling the strings on this, because how do you have this person be so powerful that isn't Plagueis? I kind of wonder sometimes when you see the clones of Snoke in the tanks at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, whether he created Snoke as a parody of his master with the scarring and everything like that and looking kind of deformed because of he having such that hate for his master when he tells Anakin that story. So that was an interesting thing that I thought about. But yeah, you get this absolutely crazy moment where Snoke gets killed. So what did you think, Matt, of how quickly they killed off Snoke, and did you kind of enjoy that twist?
I think because my brain was so set on him being the main problem, the main villain, I think my brain didn't want to comprehend what just happened, so it was just stuck in a lag of, they just fucking killed Snoke. What the fuck? Oh shit, they're fighting people. What the fuck? It was, I think I just didn't have, my brain was just like, what? I think it was great. I think it was absolutely awesome what they did with it, because I think it took Kylo Ren into a completely different direction and uncharted ground with that. So in retrospect, and I'm watching it again, I think it was such a good choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think it gave Kylo that window for him to take control, to not be pushed around like he was in Episode 7, and also the beginning of The Last Jedi, where he's told to take that stupid thing off. Just so brutal. Yeah, I think that throne room moment just kills it. Like the moment where he kills Snoke, and back to what I said earlier on, you've got good representation of red armored guard in this.
Yeah.
The only time that they get used.
The rule of cool is followed perfectly, and this is why you've got to give Rian Johnson the credit, because in The Rise of Skywalker you've got Sith troopers that are absolutely unplayed, like you've got Royal Guards in the original trilogy. Just absolutely, there's nothing there for them, especially the ones that are with Palpatine at the end. They're just absolutely tossed aside, where on here he gave them purpose, and he gave them, questionably, a lot of people were torn because a lot of people thought it should have been the Knights of Ren there instead. But the fact that we got this and they were cool, awesome characters. Like, let's talk about this throne room scene for a minute. I'm going to give my 2 thoughts on it, and then I'll pass over to Chris and Matt. But not only were we had that awesome bait and switch moment where Snoke gets killed, you've not only got the Praetorian Guards that are, living up to hype that we should have from these kind of characters, and not just absolutely Boba Fetted, but the whole fight sequence, when we think about it, with the slow-mo, with the actual set piece, it's a representation of everything burning and falling down, and then the galaxy being around them. You've got embers all over the place, and I took a moment to really think about like this, and it just beautifully shot. And if anything, I think it's one of the more interesting set pieces that we've had in a long time. That alone, and then followed up by the Battle of Crate, is just, it makes this film spot on. So I'll pass over to Matt, and then we'll pass over to Chris.
Yeah, I think visual-wise it was amazing, this bit. And I enjoy that it's not a smooth ride. I enjoy that it's partially sloppy, and it's purposely sloppy for that purpose, where it's not a simple, the Jedis with the lightsabers are much better than the other opposing threat. It's literally like it is an actual struggle for him. And for once, I actually enjoyed seeing that, because they actually added a bit more gravity to it and didn't make it a smooth ride like you expect it to be. Which then revolves back to this whole thing of this is not going to turn out the way you expect it. Which I think like that just has a constant reminder throughout this entire film.
He's literally describing his own death as it's about to happen. Like, his hubris is so massive that, like, he's seeing in Kylo Ren what's happening, but he's so fucking blinded by his own ego and his own power that he thinks it's not happening to him. He's like, you're twisting the lightsaber towards your true enemy, as like he's holding it up to Rey, and like he's just like, you're gonna ignite it and strike down your true enemy. And he's so ingrained in his own fucking ego, thinking he's the fucking supreme leader, that he doesn't like recognize the fact that he's the real enemy. He's the one, the lightsaber's right next to him. Like, if he's so strong with the fucking Force, he should be able to feel it, but he's not. He's destroyed by his own ego in that moment.
Do you reckon that oversight was something to do with that? Obviously, now we know Palpatine was controlling Snoke this whole time. Do you reckon it's something that we've got to assume that Snoke was being controlled? There was loads of him. There was 3 of him, 4 of him from what we saw. Do you reckon maybe that was Palpatine unable to see past what was physically happening, that was the oversight there, that maybe it was that?
I think it was, again, like, I think it was Palpatine's hubris just as much as Snoke's. Because to me now, seeing that Snoke was like a clone that was manufactured by Palpatine and everything like that, possibly even using Palpatine's DNA, maybe, we don't know, that's how maybe he was so imbued with the Force and stuff. I see those two characters as one in the same in this film. Snoke is a fragment of Palpatine. I think that's just Palpatine's ego throughout these 9 films, thinks that he's the fucking supreme leader of the galaxy. Like, he's done everything he can to rule over everything. So Snoke in that moment, for me, now seeing Rise of Skywalker, is like an element of Palpatine, and he's so blinded, he thinks he's in control of the entire situation. Palpatine thinks he's in control of the situation until he gets defeated in Rise of Skywalker. So I think it's literally just his own ego has spread onto Snoke. I don't think it's part of Palpatine's plan, almost. Like, I think that's just like, they're so blinded by their own ego. Like, they both think they're the top of the food chain.
Yeah, well, at this point, I think Palpatine still obviously wants Rey dead. And he still, back to my theory, is that he still wanted to take over to manipulate Ben instead, and to get Ben to strike him down. You know what I mean? So
I think in that moment, he thought his plan was going perfectly to plan.
Yeah, and I think it's after that he realises that it needs to kind of switch. So, yeah.
And then in that fight scene, I've also written Arya stole Rey's move. The way that she killed the Night King is exactly how Rey killed that last Praetorian guard.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, with the drop of the lightsaber, catch it and cut the gut type thing.
That bit where Kylo switches that lightsaber on dead quick and leaves that hole in that Praetorian guard's face, that was a moment in the cinema where everyone went, ooh.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
They're talking about the balance of the Force between the two of them, and I think this is the moment you realise that, like, in retrospect, that they are the dyad of the Force, is when they're both fighting over the lightsaber, and they're both offering the hand to each other, only Kylo can't see that he needs to turn to the grey, and Rey is just thinking that they all need to go to the light. So they're on opposite sides, thinking that they need to be Jedi and Sith, instead of realizing that together they can do this. They can be the dyad and bring the balance to the Force, but they need to be right down the middle.
What's kind of cool in this bit is that when they're pulling that lightsaber apart, you can hear the crystal humming. That I found that, from a nerd point of view, I found that pretty cool, because kyber crystals do make a hum. So
yeah, and also in that moment, as soon as it fractures, you get the Holdo maneuver. Somebody talk to me, please, about the Holdo maneuver.
What did you think of a ship going hyperspace through another ship and destroying it, Matt? Did you enjoy that?
That was so badass. That was so good.
It's very badass. It's very badass.
I think that is the most silent I have ever seen a cinema. When it blasts through and it's silent.
Look, and there were people in that cinema that we were with who, after they'd seen this, didn't like that. But you cannot doubt the people that didn't like it, when they watched it in the cinema, reacted how everybody else did when it happened.
I don't get why there's anything to dislike in that. The sound design, the visuals, the actual thought of it, like this is what always goes through my head, because so we see it in the next film when the hyperspace hopping and stuff like that. Like, you're appearing through hyperspace, you still have to fly there. You get from one to another. You're not teleporting. you're actually traveling there faster than the speed of light. You're still not going through particles. Like, so like when they're coming out in different places, they quickly have to like swerve because they're about to hit stuff. Yeah, if you're right next to something and you hyperspace through it, it would blow a goddamn massive hole into it. And it's actually finally like bringing some sort of physics to it. It's like, yeah, if there's something in the way, you're gonna fucking hit it. That's why they have to map hyperspace.
Yeah, it was an interesting way of taking down that fleet and Snoke ship.
Otherwise, there was no other way, was there?
No.
Like, and the rebellion would have never got off that planet. Like, it had to be done. It was the Holdo maneuver. It was a Hail Mary. Like, I don't get why anybody could dislike that.
No. Look, we're going to move on to the Battle of Crate now. We have missed quite a bit of this film out just because there's some really important like bits that we've talked about. So to breeze over, we've missed off like Yoda coming back as a Force ghost because we spoke about that earlier on. Phasma getting killed off, but I liked how Rian Johnson gave Phasma a little bit more to do in this film in terms of seeing her in action. That was cool.
Those 10 seconds with the hole in the mask, she does more acting than most actors in the prequels.
Yeah. Well, she got more than Boba Fett did, put it that way. We haven't talked about Benicio del Toro, but I don't think there's massive amounts to talk about with his character. I know it's an interesting story point, but I've not got problems with this character. It is what it is. So let's talk about Battle of Crate. Obviously, visually, again, I think it's stunning. I think the red sand and stuff and the walkers and all that kind of business is wicked. You've got the Falcon doing the runs through the mountains, which is very video gamey. I felt like a bit like how a video game would play out, which was cool. And then you've got the power of the First Order being shown at this point. So Matt, what did you think of did you feel the same way with like the cinematography and stuff at this bit? Because you've talked about a lot with this film about the cinematography. Is the Battle of Crate one of those bits for you as well?
I'm gonna put it down as this is my favorite location ever in Star Wars.
I like it.
I'm gonna put that down as that. I love the whole concept of that under that white, just red. It's just dark red, and like just the connotation with that. Oh my god, it's just so good, and
it's the blood in the sand, literally. Isn't
yeah,
it?
And it's just to show the impact of what, at the end of the day, war does. That's what it is at the end. Just blood on the floor, and I think it's just a mental concept, because that concept works so well with all the marketing for this film. I think it just sold it just off that location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the poster was like white and red and all that kind of business. So that's literally what it was. Chris, talk to me about the Luke appearance and the Kylo and Luke showdown.
The twist is so obvious now when you think about it. But when we were in the cinema, that was sold. Like, you see a close-up of Kylo Ren's foot, like, making a red skid and stuff like that, and then you see Luke's not making any. He's literally holding the lightsaber that we just saw get destroyed.
Yeah,
like, how
that was my fault.
He's about 20 years younger. He's had a haircut and dyed his hair a bit. Like, he's not as grey as he was. Like it's so obvious now. But, like, when you were in the cinema, when that reveal happens, when he slices through him and you think you've just seen Luke Skywalker die, and then you turn around and he's completely unfazed, that shit slaps. like that scene is so good. And also, like, he's using the blue lightsaber that we just saw get destroyed, not his green one from the end of Return of the Jedi. And then he's saying, like, if you strike me down in this moment, I'll always be a memory that haunts you, the same way that, like, his father was a memory that haunted him in The Rise of Skywalker and brought him back. So, like, as he did, he struck him down, and that stayed with him. In that moment when he's seeing Han as well, he's thinking about his mum, he's thinking about Luke and everything like that. Like, this moment was so impactful for the future of Kylo. Like, Luke basically describes where the franchise was going in this final film.
Yeah, I think it's impactful because this is the thing that pushes him over the edge. Obviously, it embarrasses him in front of Hux, the rest of the First Order, and I think that's why in The Rise of Skywalker you've got to see where that character has come from the beginning of Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker, and how much more cold, calculated and mature he is, because I think it's that just absolutely turns him, and that's what makes him pure evil for the first part of, three quarters of Rise of Skywalker.
I think as well, it's this exact moment which makes him reforge the helmet, because he wants to become that dark monster that he was again before he got showed up, before he had to face what he was actually doing.
Yeah.
He wanted to give off that presence again. Like you said, he probably lost a lot of credibility with the First Order in this moment.
Yeah.
So the fact that he reforged the helmet was to then create this Darth Vader persona again.
Yeah. And then you've got the beautiful death of Luke with twin sons, which is very nicely tied in.
We talked about it last episode with the twin sunsets, and I've literally, my note says, the sun sets on Luke Skywalker, and we all cry.
Yeah.
Oof.
I know. It's...
If that's not how it was written in the script, they missed a trick. The script literally just needed to say, and the sun sets on Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, literally. Let's wrap this film up. So the last few bits I want to talk about is the Broom Kid scene at the end. So a lot of people didn't like this. People thought it was kind of shoehorned in, but I think it relates back to how Luke says he wasn't a legend, the examples and stuff that he sets. And I think that when you see them talking about the kids are playing, aren't they? And one is Luke Skywalker and stuff. And it shows that he is, but it's the better part of him that is the legend, not the bit that he thinks. So that was a nice little bit as well. So I'm going to wrap us up. I'm going to say, let's go through Star Wars, and give you final thoughts. So I'll start with Chris, Matt, and then I'll give my final thoughts.
Goddamn Wars. This is the biggest Star Wars. Like, this is one of my favourite Star Wars films, hands down.
I'm glad that we don't hate this film as much as what other people did. And I think that I appreciate this film more now that I've seen The Rise of Skywalker. And a lot of people say that, but I think 100%. So what do you think, Matt?
So, when you first asked me on this podcast, I was on the aspect of I am definitely going to slate this shit out of The Last Jedi. But since actually in retrospect of actually watching it again, I've actually done a full 360. Yes. And I think it primarily comes down to the few things where, one, just the fucking cinematography, man. Just off number one, it is not shot like the prequels. It is shot so good. And then with everything that comes with it, with the messages that comes with it, the way that they develop characters, I do feel like some of them have been sidelined in character, like some of the characters, and I do wish that some of them had a bit more development than others did. But I'm going to go and say that this one is a Star Wars.
I'm so glad that you've been converted.
Yeah, and the thing is, it shows, right? It shows people that didn't like this film. When you go back and watch it again and you think about it, like I said at the very first, you need to think about this film when you watch it. And Matt, the way you talk about it, you clearly did think about it heavily when you watched it and thought about things like the cinematography and stuff and what it means and stuff. So, and yeah, for me, Star Wars all over. This is a Star Wars film that I can watch over and over again. And to be fair, this going into The Rise of Skywalker is kind of all you need, I think, from these new films. Being honest, I think it's enough for you to get what's going on without having to retrace your steps in The Force Awakens. So that's my thoughts on it. So
yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, I agree with that. Like, The Force Awakens suffers from a few too many issues, like, compared to The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
I think talking about it like this just makes me want to do an episode just about The Last Jedi, because there's so much we haven't talked about. Like, this film is so deep compared to all of the Star Wars films. Like, we have not talked about Poe's arc at all.
No.
Poe's arc is, to me, the biggest thing in this film. I think it's the main driving force behind the film. I think we move on to Rise of Skywalker now, and maybe we let Matt talk a lot more in this one, because we've done an episode on the Rise of Skywalker as well. If you haven't listened to it, it was our first episode. Go back and listen to it, because we had, just over an hour of talking about just the Rise of Skywalker. That was our first impressions. You can hear what we think about it now, but I want Matt to take a lead on a lot of the stuff in this.
Yeah, so the bits that I'm going to talk about probably just going to be developments on what I thought when we did the episode originally. I've come a long way with bits that I thought about with The Rise of Skywalker and thought about it a lot more in terms of what it means for the story, and for those that maybe have problems with it, that you probably shouldn't have as much of a problem with it. Yes, this film has probably got a lot of flaws in it, but they also had such a massive responsibility of trying to tie way too much up and satisfy way too much fan service. And the problem that they've done with that is that you're never going to be happy with everything when you do that with such a divided fan base. So yeah, Matt, you're going to take lead on this. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 things to do with this film, to talk about it as a whole. I'll start you with the Kylo that we see at the beginning of this film. Take it away, mate.
So we start with moonwalking Kylo to find the Sith tracker on that planet. So this is an interesting one that I was thinking before, where I would have absolutely have loved it if they finished Last Jedi with the Palpatine scene, and it just been finished in a different thing, where he cuts out with what abilities he learn and stuff like that. If they just had that one scene right at the end and just left it at that, I think that would have been so good. And then followed on with Rise of Skywalker differently than what they did. I thought that would have been so good.
I hate how we find out about the return of Palpatine in the crawl, and we heard the voice note in a clip in Fortnite. I think it was so badly handled, the return of Palpatine. Like, we clearly knew he was coming back. Just make it more evident to everyone without having to go play Fortnite just because they wanted the fucking money from Fortnite, or just like, instead of having it in the crawl, that like he's sent out a broadcast or something, or like just tell us that Palpatine's back, and then the first thing be somebody receiving that call or something like that.
Can I quickly pitch you an ending to The Last Jedi and the beginning to The Rise of Skywalker, Matt?
And this is what we do on this podcast.
To see whether it is what you think. So let's take the beginning of Rise of Skywalker right up until we finish with Palpatine, and then you see them on the Falcon, right? Let's say The Last Jedi ended with Kylo going to Mustafar, which, yes, that is Mustafar, by the way.
Really?
That's the same planet, it's just a different part of it. So yeah, Vader's castle is somewhere there, which is cool. Let's say that moment where he goes to Mustafar, gets the holocron, the Wayfinder, and then goes and finds Palpatine, that could be a perfect parallel to how The Force Awakens ended, where Rey finds Luke. Have that, and then start The Rise of Skywalker with the Falcon getting the message about a spy and then doing the light speed skipping. Is that your more ideal start to The Rise of Skywalker and end of Last Jedi?
Yes.
That's all they need. See, that's it. That's it, innit? It makes it such a better film already, and it makes it make more sense and gives you time for people to simmer on the fact Palpatine's back as well. So yeah.
And it ties Palpatine more into the whole trilogy as a whole, and at that point you would understand that he was the one that made Snoke the way he was, which would have tied up a lot of people's issues with The Last Jedi. Last 10 minutes of The Last Jedi could have fixed what people were complaining about.
Yeah. Plus, who doesn't want to start the film with the Falcon light speed skipping, because that's sick.
I think the biggest issue with Rise of Skywalker was the first 40 minutes of this was so rushed. If you take out 10 minutes at the beginning, you've got more time for shit.
Yeah, you've got the Rey training scene, which is cool, isn't it?
Where she does the blatant flip thing with the green screen, where he does like the kind of like flip over and she lands nicely on the floor.
You can see the wires on her.
Yeah, like, where are they? Where are they? Looking in deeply. They've got that. And then they go to the fancy festival planet where they go bump into Lando Calrissian.
What did you think about what they did with Leia in this film? What did you think of that?
I think it's always going to be a tricky one, isn't it? Because, I mean, they couldn't change the circumstance of what it landed itself in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt like Leia was very sidelined in episode 8. I felt, but then at the same time, as Chris previously mentioned, it's not the trilogy now, it's someone else's trilogy. It started all over again. It's not exactly like it revolves around Leia, Luke, and Han anymore. Well, definitely not Han anymore. I there's only so much you can do, really, isn't there? And I think it was quite gracious the way they led it.
I think it's amazing what they did. It just felt a little bit of a shame that it felt so shoehorned into the movie.
Yeah.
That's my only thing with it. But I think they did a very good job of what they did. And I'm glad that we got more of it. It was just a shame it felt shoehorned when I watched it.
I think the scenes that we had with because they said she had filmed stuff before she had passed away and stuff. I think they were the scenes that were potentially like the death scene or like the scenes that more worked with her. I think the bits that you noticed that they had to cut around her from other films were the first bit with Rey's training, because she'll literally just like say something cryptic and then Rey will talk for the rest of the conversation. Like Rey's basically talking from both of their perspectives and stuff. And then like the next bit when Poe comes back and stuff like that, and they're talking about Palpatine being back and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think they're the most jarring bits, because like she's literally just like giving like little Yoda quotes here and there, and everybody else is filling in the rest of the conversation for her. I think that's the most jarring bits.
I thought it was a shame that they masked Kylo again as well. I think personally, it's one of them. I'm on the fence, so I understand why they masked him again, because he wanted to be that dark, and and he wanted to be what he was. He wanted to go back to that comfort that he had with the mask. But I feel like the moment where him and Rey had that conversation, I would have liked to have had Adam Driver there, considering how good he is in this film. I would have liked to. Yeah,
we had a conversation before this film came out, and I said to you, I don't want him to get the mask back. And part of his arc in The Last Jedi was kill the past. Like, he stopped trying to be Vader and tried to be himself. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he put the helmet back on, which was his representation of him trying to be Vader, didn't really work for the character. But you gave me the pitch, Sam, before the film came out. He's like, yeah, but what if he takes the helmet off and he's all fucked up like fucking Anakin in episode 3 with like the red yellowy eyes and everything, and he's getting corrupted by the dark side. That is the only reason they should have put the helmet back on, was to get a reveal like that, but they didn't.
That would have been cool. That was just me wishing, though. Matt, I'm gonna remind you of a couple of jokes that happened in The Rise of Skywalker, and you can just tell me whether they landed or not for you.
Okay, go.
So the torch joke in the cave where Rey lights a lightsaber
Disney.
and Poe lights his torch.
It's a very Josh Whedon one, isn't it?
It's a very Disney joke as well, I thought.
It's like,
okay,
again, that's like a Disney Channel joke.
Yeah, true. When they meet Lando and he tells the driver to go, and it's just an alien that turns around and goes, okay, and then turns back round. What did you think of that?
I think I did actually laugh out loud from how fucking random it was, and how very like it's a trap type thing it was.
That didn't really feel like a joke to me. That just felt like it was like, yeah, okay.
It's just a bit of
It's
humour.
another practical effect alien that looked weird.
Babu Frick in total. I thought he was quite funny, but what did you think?
Babu Frick.
I'm okay with that. I can live with that. I thought C-3PO's very emo, sarcastic joke when they've gone through the sinkhole made me laugh. When he was like, "Oh, you didn't shout my name, but I'm okay if you're wandering anyway."
Well, we established this last time. C-3PO is the sassiest motherfucker in this entire fucking franchise.
Yeah.
He literally is. And he has a moment where he's like, oh, I think I thought of another route, and then he gets switched off, and it's like, yep, okay, shut up. And
I wrote in my notes, I was like, there's finally a bit of redemption for C-3PO. We know like he acts like a dick to anyone. I thought C-3PO finally being less of a dick, because he has that moment where he's like, oh, I'm taking one last look at my friends. And like that was the audience having one last look at this Star Wars, like the Skywalker saga and everything like that. Like that's a big moment.
Yeah.
And then fucking the bad part of that scene is fucking the J.J. Abrams fucking Dino fucking robot telling us how we should feel in every scene, because he only has one line of dialogue whenever he talks. He's like, oh, scared. This time he's like, oh, I'm taking one last look at my friends, and it just cuts to the robot going, sad. Fucking thank you, robot. Yes, because I didn't realize I should feel sad right now.
what was your reaction like, Matt, where Kylo and Rey were having that kind of force off with the transport that Chewbacca was on, doing quote fingers?
I was more distracted by the fact that I thought they killed Chewbacca. Like,
yeah,
I was absolutely
really unceremoniously.
Yeah. I think that kind of gave away that he wasn't dead. I think it was just so obvious that he wasn't dead. The fact of that he was just so really ungracious. The complete opposite to the Leia side of it, where they just blew the fucker up, and it wasn't so good. But that lightning bit was sick.
It literally caught everybody off guard in the cinema. That nobody saw that coming when it happened, and the fact that then there was hang on, you had this really cool moment where they were Force grabbing a spaceship, and it's like, that's cool anyway.
Force Unleashed.
Yeah, very, very video gamey again. But then you get the lightning, and just after you've processed the fact Rey's just shot lightning out of a hand, you're then like, hang on, they've just killed Chewbacca. Even my girlfriend was sat next to me, and she was just like, oh my God. And I was like, what? It was just like so bad. Yeah.
I was literally just like, my jaw was on like the floor during that scene, because we just had this sick like TIE Whisperer fucking speeding in, and Rey flipping over it as well.
Yeah,
like,
you have
there was like really cool moments in this scene, like, and like my jaw was just like, oh,
yeah.
like, couldn't believe it.
It was a film that you had to watch twice at least when it came out, because it was just that much going on and it moves that quick. And to be fair, I think once you've kind of had time to digest it, you like this film a lot more. And I think that's why people should probably be a little bit more forgiving of it. I'm skipping over the bit where there's Force healing because it's in video games. If you don't think that she should be healing snakes, then go play some video games instead, because it's in there. It's a thing. If you've got a problem with Force healing, you should have a problem with Force speed at the beginning of Phantom Menace, where they just you never
they use it once and never again.
Never again. What did you think of Hux being the spy, Matt?
I thought Hux was such a wasted character. I am
in this film. Fuck me.
They 180 him from The Force Awakens, don't they? 100%.
Yeah, I think the character development just flops flat on its fucking ass in this with Hux. I mean, they have this primitive where I think the relationship between Kylo and Hux is very much like this. You have this big brother and you have this little brother, and the bigger brother gets all the attention and stuff like that. Whereas Hux, being the little brother, just wants that attention, wants that glory, but yet he never seems to achieve that with him being in Kylo Ren's shadow. And I think that was a nice feeling to that. I feel like the way they dealt with Hux in this, just to kind of get rid of him, was just very rush.
Just get rid of the Richard E. Grant character and give that arc to Hux. Just have the mole be unnamed. It was just a fucking stormtrooper or something that's defected again.
I just think it's the point. I didn't see
you
the
don't
point
need
Richard
to
E.
explore
Grant.
who the mole is. Big epic speech in The Force Awakens he gets like one line of dialogue and then he gets shot.
Like you said, instead of Richard E. Grant, you should have had Hux get to the point where he was like how he was in The Last Jedi, how he was going to kill Kylo while he was down. He was going to shoot him with a blaster in the throne room. Have that thing where he kind of goes behind Kylo to go deal directly with Palpatine and let him just be a mix of the Hux and the Richard E. Grant. I mean, he was there for a bit of comic relief and stuff, and it was you didn't see it coming, but it was interesting. Let's move on. Another quick little bit. I mean, we've talked about Rey being a Palpatine. I'm not going to talk about that now because we talked about it earlier on. So that's a big chunk of this film, to be fair. But a little thing you might want to know is in the poster for this film, there was leaked images of 3PO using Chewbacca's bowcaster with all the equipment on, where it looked like he was going to go murdering C-3PO, horror film C-3PO. That is actually it must be from a deleted scene, because when Vin gives him all of Chewbacca's gear to carry it, so I'm assuming there is a bit in there where the Falcon is escaping that Star Destroyer. It must have been filmed where 3PO uses the bowcaster against stormtroopers or something.
I don't know if he would use it. Maybe it's just a callback to Empire Strikes Back when Chewie is carrying around C-3PO's parts all the time. Maybe it's just a callback to that, like he's then having to carry around all of Chewbacca's stuff.
Yeah.
But also on the poster, you had that fucking weird yellow slug alien that's only in the fucking first scene.
That was probably in there more than.
Who's fixing stuff even though he has no hands. He's fixing the Millennium Falcon with no hands.
That's Star Wars for you. Yeah,
Why
so
was he on the poster? Fucking hell.
yeah. Let's skip right to the Kylo and Rey battle on the Death Star ruins. Matt, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the fight was pretty cool on this. I think I preferred this fight to the end fight.
This one felt heavy. She's just sailed across a rocky sea all by herself on like a little skimmer. She's just had that vision. Also, I put in my notes, would you guys rather it have been a vision or maybe a clone? Because there were concepts of a Rey clone, a dark side Rey. Maybe if that would have been a cool thing, if they brought in like a dark side Rey clone and then that's who she could have fought at the end. Because Palpatine doesn't really have a fight until the Force lightning, does he?
True.
Also, why hasn't Rey got the two-sided lightsaber? I've said this all along. She's so much better with it. She gets it at the fucking end when it's too fucking late.
I think that, I think maybe she shouldn't have seen Dark Rey until she got to the Sith throne. When she got to the Sith throne, there should have been Dark Rey either
sat on the throne,
sitting on it, and then she should have had that moment. And then Palpatine comes out saying, "I couldn't. If you were a failure of a granddaughter and blah 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 blah. But little do you know that you know what I mean." And write it better than that. But maybe that would have been a cool alternative to it. So
there is concept for that. I don't know if it was going to be another vision or whether it was a clone, but there was a dark version of Rey sat on the throne.
Yeah, Dark Rey would have been a wicked. Have her fight herself, just like how she was fighting a light and dark side, and how Anakin was and stuff. But have it literally, and then maybe have Ben come along at the end and help her, and then they take down Palpatine together and stuff. So,
do you think maybe Rey had a hand in killing Leia in that moment as well? Because Leia dies as Rey essentially kills Kylo Ren.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe she just uses her Force energy to communicate with him a bit like what Luke
she
did.
distracts him, but then Rey kills him, and I don't know if, like, in that moment he was dying. I don't know if that maybe Leia sensed that he was dying and she had lost everyone then.
Maybe.
I don't know if that had a hand in maybe speeding up, like, because she lay down and everything, she knew that this was going to be like her final act type thing. But I don't know if like Rey jolted it or something.
What I also liked about that Death Star fight is that it was kind of about Kylo showing that Rey that he can do everything Rey can do, but better. There's the bit where they jump over and he jumps further than her. And then there's the bit where they force hold the lightsabers as they're swinging and they hold them in place. They block them using that, and he blocks it for longer.
The first half of this fight, he's not on the offensive. She is. She's just seen the dark side of her, and she is leaning into the dark side, being the aggressor in that fight. He's doing what Luke was doing. He was dodging. He didn't even have his lightsaber lit until he left, like, the throne room.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I didn't like about this was the music and the lack of music, and also just the music choices that they had. There was that little bit of music where it's when he blocks the lightsaber and there were stabs. I didn't really like that. To me, it didn't feel very Star Wars. It didn't feel very John Williams, that whole bit. I don't know, kind of killed it a little bit, that bit for me, but here we are. Let's move straight on to Kylo with Han. What did you think of Han and the Kylo bit where Kylo actually redeems in that bit?
I think it was a nice payoff. I think the mirroring just worked perfectly. I think it had all the feels to it, and I think it just worked nicely. I think it was a nice wrap up with where they were taking Kylo / Ben Solo. And I think it just worked well. I think it had that gravity to it. And I don't know what they had originally planned or whether that was the plan, but I think that would have been, out of whatever scenario they had, I think that would have worked the best.
It was really nice having the parallels. Obviously, they started using the same dialogue that they had on Starkiller Base. They literally did the same actions, had the same dialogue, like, I know what I've got to do, but I don't know if I can do it. But this time it's the light side taking over. They were surrounded by blue, open skies and everything like that. There wasn't as much darkness. He's essentially just been on the brink of death. And that's what it took for him to come back. And like Luke said, like, the memory of Han and everyone's going to stay with him. So I think that was good for the redemption. If it didn't have that moment with Han, I don't think I would have been as sold on the redemption.
my idea that I had and what I would have liked in this scene would have been, I liked how Han appeared at first. I have a feeling that what would have been good fan service, I suppose, just to recognise it, would have been having Han have that moment with him. But before it gets to... I love the poetry of the, I know what I need to do, but I don't know whether I have the strength to do it. But I have a feeling that it would have been cool if Han had said something, like, let's say Kylo said that, and then maybe Han said, there's someone you need to talk to, and then Anakin Force Ghost appears. I would have just loved a moment where you could have Anakin speak to Kylo and explain that I wasn't who you thought I was, and that be the thing that pushed Kylo into redeeming. I know it would have been probably too much on top of everything else that we got, and I liked what we got. I would have loved that moment where maybe he said there's someone else needs to talk to. It was a Vader, what he unmasks, and it's actually Anakin Hayden Christensen underneath the helmet or something. And it just has that moment where he realizes that he has had it all wrong.
My version of that would be, I don't think that's the right time to have Anakin in it. I think maybe like have him interact with Anakin at some point, but differently. Maybe on Mustafar or something like that. I reckon if you were going to do something like that, you would have it Leia. She's passed on in that moment, and she's used the last of the Force left in her to communicate with Ben, instead of just like distracting him long enough for Rey to win the fight. So you've got Han, who's literally just like a memory to him. And I think that's why Han doesn't really do anything other than recycle The Force Awakens, because he's not a Force ghost. He's not creating anything new. He's a memory for him at that point. So he's literally memorizing his last moments with his dad. Then have Force Ghost Leia then maybe talk to him.
Maybe, yeah. So I like how we have that throwback to Luke and Leia in training. I think the whole Luke Force Ghost thing's pretty cool, how he lifts the X-Wing out. It's a beautiful comparison to how he couldn't do it in The Empire Strikes Back, or couldn't believe he could do it. Let's skip right forward to the Ben Solo redemption point, because then we can start to finish this up. What did you think of Ben Solo coming back doing I need a hero moment?
That's literally the thing I was thinking of when you think of that moment. You can just imagine that in the background. I can't get rid of that now. It's the same with my stick is better than bacon. Anyway, I think this was so good. I think the parallels in like the characterization, the way that he moved, I think was very much resemblance of what Han Solo was like in cocky and arrogance, like when he just shrugs his shoulders. I thought that was good. I think that full circle was pretty cool.
The music's really good in this bit because it kind of bounces between a positive version of Kylo's theme, and it also bounces between Rey's theme as well. It literally uses those two themes, but rather than being dead sinister as Kylo's theme, it's like a more happier, lighter version of it, which is cool. A quick little mention, because there's a lot of talking and stuff that goes on in this. It's just a little fact drop that when Palpatine mentions a dyad in the Force unseen for generations, if he is literally speaking unseen for generations, what it could be relating back to, because it is canon, is that in the Old Republic games, the only other dyad we've seen in the Force before is Darth Revan and Bastila Shan, who is from the video games. So that could be a nice little nod to that, a little bit of Star Wars knowledge. If you, Chris will know what. Yeah.
Also, she has the same near enough identical lightsaber that Rey ends up with at the end.
Very similar. Is that a double-bladed lightsaber? It's just a single.
Which one that Rey has?
Yeah, at the end.
At the end, no. If you actually see it on a thing, it's got an emitter at both ends.
Very cool.
But you only ever see one side get lit, which pisses me off more. Like, if you see it, it's got an emitter on both ends.
It's a staff, isn't it? It pretty much looks like
it's the top of the staff.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Palpatine's lightning in the sky is pretty cool. The sound design at that bit's pretty mint as well.
Yeah, the way it cuts out for a second and fucking sonic booms, it's a big sub drop.
Yeah. The Be With Me moment with all the other voices and stuff in the background. Matt, what did you think of that? Did you pick up on who those voices were in the background as well?
Yeah, I think it was like a montage of all different Jedi in reference to the previous films. So you got your Urian, you got your Yoda, you got your Sam Jackson. I think it was just a good basket of previous Jedi, I think.
Should we have seen Force Ghosts of the most important Jedi? All the stuff happening in space as well.
Yep.
And you've got all the ships like jump out of hyperspace. And like that's their end game Avengers Assemble moment.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that in the cinema made me well up. Like that was like such an impactful moment. You get the return of Wedge Antilles as well. Is this the first time we've heard the main Star Wars score in the actual film not being used for the credits or the crawl? I think it is. You hear the main Star Wars theme as soon as they all come in.
Did it not get used for episode 6, or am I making that up?
I don't know. We'll chat about that afterwards because I'll have to.
It needs
I'll
a
have
fact
to,
check, but I think it was like that stands out to me in my memory,
It's wicked.
which was more impactful for me.
And then after all that, you've got all the ships landing at the end, big celebration, a bit like Return of the Jedi, where it goes between all the planets. Also, a little Easter egg, you've got the ship from the Mandalorian in there, landing right at the end as well. It's probably just a Easter egg because they just had, in the making of this shot where they had all the ships, they just had loads of models of Star Wars ships that they just used in this. So
Yeah,
they were like, if you
they had the Ghost and the Phantom and stuff like that from Rebels, and literally any ship that's been in Star Wars canon that a Rebels flown was in that shot.
yeah, they were like, if you see a ship that's in there, it's just because it's in there. That was what the designers said. So, and Chewie got a medal, which is nice. Nice little thought.
That was this like final scene when they land back at the base. Like just like it hits me right in the feels. Like you said, Chewie finally gets the medal, which is Han's medal as well. So like Han passed it on to Leia when he passed away, and then it gets passed to Chewie. Like he finally gets a thanks from like essentially all his previous friends. He's the only one left. Him and Lando.
Feels.
Like literally feels in this moment.
Okay,
like,
right.
You see everybody finally celebrating. It's so good.
So now we're going to do Star Wars and Star Wars, and then you say, what did you think about Rey and Kylo's ending, and what did you think of the very last bit with Rey Skywalker and burying the lightsabers? So you need to touch on those two things. So I'll go with Matt first.
Right. So, with whether it's a Star Wars or Star Wars, I've given this some thought in terms of that. Yeah, there are some good aspects of this, but there is a lot of stuff that cannot be forgiven with how it rushes through stuff and how it just doesn't flow the way it should do. It wastes a lot of time with factors that should have been brought in the previous installment, whether it's just very much like a moment of making up for lost time with it, and there just wasn't a natural direction throughout the trilogy where the things should have been set in places in timeline. So I'm going to go with Star Wars on this one.
That's fair.
Fair enough.
So in regards to the take my breath away Top Gun moment between Ray and Ben, I don't know. I felt like it was a bit pointless. I think that's just me. I feel like there's no point putting it there for if there was just no real. It wasn't needing to go anywhere. There wasn't any. It wasn't like it needed to be done. I think that's where I mainly sit on it, and I like the end. I think the whole concept of that the burying the lightsabers is pretty much putting an end to the Skywalker saga. It's putting an end to a definitive end because that lightsaber is not going to be passed on to someone else. It's there. It's done. It's buried, as Kylo likes to say.
Kill the past.
Kill the past. Buried. So I think it was a fitting end. I think what left me with a bit of taste when I watched this originally was the fact of how rushed it was.
What did you think, Chris?
Right. My thing with the Rey and Kylo bit at the end, so I had a different outlook on it this time. Like, I'm still not a fan of the kiss. I didn't see those guys romantically involved at any point throughout this trilogy. I don't think you need romance between them. People have said to me that it's not a romantic kiss, but they kissed for way too long for it not to be romantic. Also, if you think about Palpatine making Anakin and all that sort of stuff, they're kind of like second cousins, which makes it even worse. It's like Game of Thrones shit at that point. So I'm not a fan of the kiss. I am a fan of him being able to bring her back from the Force, though. So the trilogy is all about bringing balance to the Force, and in that moment, Ben returns to the light, and in that moment, we see the death of the Sith, and we see the death of the Jedi, and Rey after that point becomes the grey. She becomes the balance in the middle, and I think that's why she's got a golden, like, orange lightsaber at the end, because she's not like blue, she's not red, she's in the middle. So I think that needed to happen, A, to bring his arc full, and B, to like bring balance to the Force finally. The fact that we don't have Rey as a Jedi at the end of it, I see her more as in the middle, means that it's still in balance because she's right down the middle, she's not on one side. Because if she was a Jedi, then it's not in balance because you don't have the opposing force. So I like that. And also, I didn't realize this time, at the beginning of the film, Palpatine says, like, you can achieve what Anakin could not. Anakin, his entire thing in Revenge of the Sith was achieving being able to save people from death. And what did he do at the end? He achieved what Anakin could not and brought someone back from the dead. He saved the person that he needed to save. And I did not notice it until I watched it this time. And fuck me, that I was like shook. Because I picked up on that line at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker this time. And then when he brought him back from the dead, I was like, oh my God. That's all Anakin wanted, was to be able to save people from death. His mother and Padme, the people that he cared about. I was like, oh my God, he finally did what his grandfather could not, which means he surpassed Anakin, which means his character arc was full and he could die in peace. Thank you. As opposed to and then the bit at the end, I'm fine with the burying the lightsabers, totally fine. The Rey Skywalker makes sense in context of it's the family that you choose, it's the family that takes you in and nurtures you, and if she was potentially created the same way Anakin was, she has equal claim to the Skywalker name and everything like that. So that's fine, whatever. And I like the dual sunsets fade at the end. Also, Jedi funerals, when they bury a Jedi, they have an orange beacon of light comes out of their gravestones, which stay there forever. So as she buried the lightsabers, she ignited that, and it was almost like a Jedi funeral, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, that's a cool parallel.
You've seen my journey with Rise of Skywalker on this podcast. When we first saw the film, episode 1, I loved it. I thought it was a great film. And then we discovered what Duel of the Fates could have been, and I've been really pissed off with this film ever since. And I think I said to Sam before I watched this, I don't know if I can be arsed watching this because I was on such a downer thinking about what the Duel of the Fates could have been, and it really bothered me. And it's been chipping away at how much I liked this film. And then I watched it again today and I was like, it's not Duel of the Fates, but it's still a damn good film. It had such a tricky job. The first 40 minutes are shaky, but the way it lands it, I think is fine. So I'm going to give it a Star Wars at the end.
Okay, I agree. Star Wars. I agree with everything kind of that you've both said, to be fair. I'm kind of down the middle a little bit, so I agree with everything Chris... Well, I'm grey. Star grey. Grey Wars. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit down the middle. So I think it's because I would have loved to have seen a result where Ben didn't die and didn't have to die. I would have loved to have seen that. So I do give it a Star Wars because I think when I've watched them 7, 8, 9 all in a row again, and I've had time to think about it, I didn't like Rise of Skywalker as much, and I think I liked it a bit more now, and I think I felt a little bit more complete by it, so that's why it gets a Star Wars. I think in terms of Rey and Ben, that whole bit, I didn't like the kiss, and I didn't like how he just flopped and died right after it, and it kind of, in the cinema, it felt like a healing match, like, Rey will save you, you'll save Rey, you'll die, but Rey won't be able to save you because you're dead for good, kind of thing. And to me, it just felt like too much going on. The ending with the Rey Skywalker, I get it. It feels a little bit shoehorned in. I'm on that side of the fans with it. How I would have kind of liked to have seen this, what would have been like a nice ending for me personally, was Ben didn't have to die to save her. Yes, it's because he transferred all his life and force energy to her, but he didn't have to die. He didn't have to in that moment. He was fine. It would have been a beautiful ending to have seen him and Rey have that moment together and both return. it would have been a really nice... I know that people would have had problems with that because it would have been like, how can Ben go from being Kylo Ren and murdering all these people and being such a horrible person and be welcomed back at the end? But to see him as Ben Solo and to see him stood with Rey at the end and to know that those two did it and saved everyone, I reckon they may have looked past it. They would have had a moment when they would have returned at the end on both of them. It would have been awesome to have seen them both get out of that X-Wing, or for Rey to get out and then for Ben to get out afterwards. But don't have talking, just have the music like they did. And then have the moment where they both go to Tatooine at the end. They both pay homage to the lightsabers, setting them away, putting an end to it, like what he spoke about when they were both talking in The Last Jedi, about saying that forget the Jedi, forget the Sith, forget all of it. And then don't have that random woman at the end. Just have those two, have Force Ghost Luke and Leia, and then that's it. Twin sunsets, end of the film. Now,
the way you just described that made me think of an awesome last shot, if you want to talk about that, which I think would have nailed what you just said then. If they both went to drop off the lightsabers, but you didn't realize that like Ben had gone with her maybe, and like Rey buries the lightsabers, and you don't have that woman. As she starts to walk back, she meets with Ben as the two sunsets are set in. You've got both of them in silhouette.
And then you get the Force Ghost Luke and Leia watching them. It would have been nice. It would have been a nice alternative ending.
I do think that for him to bring her back from being dead, he should have died, though.
Let us know what you think in the comments. Leave a comment. Let us know. Hit us up on Twitter and Facebook and all that. So, yeah, cool. Right, Matt, last question for you before we wrap this up. Rank your top 3 Star Wars films out of all the Star Wars films. Just any trilogy, any spin-off film, rank your top 3.
Don't need to be in order, but what's your perfect trilogy?
Oh, my God. Okay. So... that's a crazy one.
They don't need to be in order, so it should make it a little bit easy. You don't have to rank them. Yeah.
I'm just going to lob these in. So, Revenge of the Sith. Because, what a film. I'm going to say Empire Strikes Back.
Very cool. Better than Matty's choice.
Yeah. If you didn't see Matt Lunn's reaction to our last episode on Instagram, it was pretty damn funny. Calling out his fellow podcast member.
It was before I trimmed my beard, and I just looked like a very angry homeless man. Yeah, so Empire. Do you know what? I'm going to go for New Hope. Purely because... of the fact of the way... If you want to do it in order, you go Sith, Hope, Empire, and do it that way. Now...
It's a pretty good trilogy, that.
Yeah.
It makes sense as well. You could just watch those 3 films and it makes sense.
Yeah, it completes the Star Wars. Yeah, I'm going to go with them just down to the fact of... With A New Hope, I felt like because it's got that nostalgic weight to it, I feel that you can't beat some of the iconic moments where it introduces those characters that have built the franchise it is today. I feel like the turn of Anakin Skywalker in episode 3 is well worth the payoff, even though you've got episode 1 and 2 and political discussions on it, even though they probably make more sense than actual politics in the UK at the minute anyway. And then Empire Strikes Back because of just the darkness in it as well. I think that's what I enjoy about that.
I've got one last question for you then, Matt.
Go.
Which out of the trilogies is the best complete trilogy?
OG.
Original trilogy.
Cool. It's a shame Matty beat you to that one because his taste in the original trilogy is quite questionable.
Yeah.
And that pretty much wraps us up for this 3-part Star Wars-a-thon that we've had for May. Matt, obviously you have a podcast with the other 2 Matts. Do you want to tell us where we can find that podcast?
Yes, so an Earful podcast where we talk all about music and horror films, and with creatives where we prefer conversation over an interview. You can find us on our socials at an Earful podcast. So that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can now see some of our quarantine lockdown content where we're video chatting with some of the guests. And you can check us all out on all of popular podcasting platforms, or the majority of them even. So that's Spotify, that's Acast, that's Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you listen to podcasts.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having
It's
us,
been great
fellas.
having you guys all on.
And where can people find you, Matt?
Well, if you want to follow me, you can find me at Magical Lunn on Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. And yeah, to echo Chris, thank you very much for coming on and giving us a good, decent amount of time to talk about nerdy Star Wars films and letting us absolute nerd out for you. So
That's cool.
Appreciate
I'm fine.
it.
Thank you for having me. Cheers, fellas.
No problem at all. And you can check out Get Real on all your socials at Get Real Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also hit us up on email if you want to send us emails. It's getrealpoduk@gmail.com. Chris, where can people check out the podcast?
You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, don't forget to leave us a rate and a review. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere, including YouTube. Follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube, Get Real Podcast, where we upload all the videos in full.
And if you've listened to all 3 of these crazy long episodes, and yes, they've been crazy long, thank you very, very, very much. And be sure to leave us a rating, review on anywhere you listen to podcasts as well to help support us as well.
The support that we're getting on the podcast at the moment is great. Just want to say thank you to everybody that's listening at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to put a little video out, but we've had the most successful month of Get Real that we've ever had. So yeah, thank you very, very much to all those listeners that have stayed with us and also new listeners as well.
Well done, guys.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Yeah. Yeah, and that's us for another week. And we will catch you next time.
The name's Ray. Ray Star Wars. Ba-dum, 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 ba-diddle-dum.